Chapter 305. Are there only a few of you here? Can't you find more people to come over? It's almost midnight. Jiang Hai glanced at his watch, then looked at Aphrodite and the others who didn't sleep last night and couldn't stand it tonight. Hearing his words, the person in charge opposite him couldn't help but smile awkwardly. Since Jiang Hai's ship arrived at the dock, Jiang Hai took these things and boarded the escort car arranged by Phillips. Of course, Moses Adams, who has been waiting here for a long time, was also in the car. The group soon arrived at Phillips' office in Miami, and then the experts prepared by the person in charge came in handy. Unfortunately, he underestimated Jiang Hai's treasures. He only prepared 6 experts, and it takes more than 10 minutes or even more than half an hour for each expert to appraise the authenticity of an item. After all, these things are very valuable. If one of them makes a mistake, they will be the ones to suffer a loss. So they have to deal with it carefully. Jiang Hai and the others arrived here at 7 o'clock in the evening. Until now, it's already past 2 o'clock in the middle of the night, and these people have only counted about half of the things. The other half of the things haven't been touched yet, especially the most important one, the set of armor. He hasn't slept for almost 2 consecutive days. With Jiang Hai's physique, although it's not to the extent that he can't stand it, it's inevitable that he's sleepy. He couldn't help but yawn and helplessly said to the person in charge in front of him, "I'll deal with it right away." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, although the person in charge complained in his heart that Jiang Hai brought so many things here, he wouldn't say so. After all, these things can generate wealth for the auction house. Although that set of armor is a big deal, in fact, the money that can be earned from the auction of that set of armor is not too much. The only thing they could ask for was the commission after the auction. However, in order to win over Jiang Hai, a big customer, the original 10% commission had been reduced to 3%. 100 million would only earn them 3 million, and 1 billion would only earn them 30 million. It was really not much. They were more interested in earning money to advertise themselves. However, if he were to sell these jewels, gold, and silver coins, it would be real money. The price they offered Jiang Hai was very high, but no matter how high it was, they still made a profit. Even if they made $100 for each gold coin, $10 for each silver coin, and $1,000 for each gemstone, this large amount of jewelry was enough to make them hundreds of millions. Therefore, compared to the armor, they had no choice but to be more careful with it. However, as Jiang Hai had said, the progress of 6 people handling such a large pile of jewelry was indeed too slow. Not to mention whether they could handle it. It was also very tiring for him to wait here. Therefore, after thinking for a while, he went out and found a group of clerks. These people were the staff of Phillips's office in Miami. Their main purpose was to help with the appraisal. Of course, they would not touch the precious jewels and gold coins, but they could help with the ordinary silver coins. For this purpose, he specially asked them to change into a set of clothes without pockets before he came over and started to work. After distributing the largest amount of silver coins, the rest of the people appraised the valuable items, which was indeed a lot faster. At 5 o'clock in the morning, all the gold and silver coins were appraised. This time, Jiang Hai got a total of 27,665 gold coins and 86,742 silver coins. Of course, these gold and silver coins were not all from Spain. In fact, the currency in Europe had always been very chaotic. There was no clear currency, especially in the Middle Ages of Europe. From the 14th to the 16th century, the currency in Europe was quite chaotic. Europe was already in a mess, let alone the American continent, which was colonized by them. At the beginning of the 14th century, the lords of Shenluo imitated the Groschen coin and made the Groschen coin, which was a hard currency at that time. But then France issued gold coins twice, both of which failed. It was not until the standard gold coin of France appeared that the currency stabilized and was used until the era of Louis XIV. Then, in 1344, England issued a noble gold coin, which weighed about 972 grams and was worth 6 shillings and 8 pence, which was equivalent to half a mark gold and 1/3 of a pound silver, but it was not very popular. The Lords of the Rhine unified the standard of imitating the Groschen coin and called it the Rhine shield, but the shield was very light. At first, it only weighed 23 carats. 23 carats was not a gram. Otherwise, if a diamond had a dozen carats equal to a dozen grams, it would be a big deal. Conversion units were 5 carats equal to 1 gram. The Rhine shield was 23 grams and half a carat in the early stage, and 19 carats in the later stage. Converted to grams, it was about 4 grams. For pirates, such a large amount of gold coins was really not enough. In addition to the Spanish gold coins, Jiang Hai had the most gold coins from the golden Egyptian and English nobles. Basically, each of them weighed nearly 10 grams. Only these gold coins were valuable enough. Although they were not all Spanish gold coins, they were of about the same age and weight, so their value is naturally not much different. According to the orders of the auction house's leader, the person in charge was still according to the price of the last transaction. 1 gold coin was $1,000, and 1 silver coin was $350. In total, there were more than 110,000 gold coins. 1 ton of gold and silver coins was worth $58,024,700. More than $50 million was not a lot, but it was very much in line with Jiang Hai's requirements. At least as soon as the money came out, his savings rose again. And most importantly, the gems had not been identified yet. With the money as a foundation, Jiang Hai felt a lot better. Unknowingly, the sun in Miami shone on this land. It was not until 9 o'clock in the morning that Aphrodite and the others, who had already fallen asleep, finally got up and moved their sore bodies. Finally, the last gem had been identified. The appraiser over there handed the forms to the person in charge. The person in charge did a rough calculation and then looked at Jiang Hai with some surprise. "What's wrong? Is there something wrong?" Jiang Hai leaned on the sofa and looked at the person in charge in front of him. "Of course not. Everything is right, but this is really a lot of money." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the person in charge here shook his head, walked in front of Jiang Hai, and handed the 6 forms to Jiang Hai. These 6 tables were made by the 6 people. Every time they finished looking at an item, they would record a string of numbers on it. This was their estimate. Basically, the auction house wouldn't make a loss, so they would calculate and buy according to the price on the table. Although they didn't know where Jiang Hai got these things from, it didn't prevent them from collecting these things. After taking the forms in front of him, Jiang Hai also looked at them. When he saw the first form, he couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. 1 pigeon blood ruby, net weight 41. 5 carats, estimated age between 1600 to 1650. Other items, none, just a necklace pendant, estimated price, 183,350 to 192,275. 1 golden green cat's eye, net weight 37. 84 carats, estimated age 1600 to 1650. Other items, a string of natural pearl lotus, estimated price, 156,700 to 158,900. Looking at the numbers above these things, Jiang Hai couldn't help but be happy. Not only were there rubies, emeralds, sapphires, topaz, but there were also many cat's eyes, golden green gemstones, and so on. There were even ivory and coral products. Jiang Hai didn't know much about these, but he understood the estimated price at the back. Even if they were all calculated according to the lowest price, he would still make a profit this time. The 6 forms were about the same, and Jiang Hai also calculated the price of these things in his heart. This made his heart skip a beat. Sure enough, for a pirate ship like this, gold and silver coins were just a small part. The real value was these jewelry. For these jewelry, I won't quote you according to the lowest price. Let's take a round number. The gold and silver coins here are 58 million. My final price for these jewelry is 242 million. Let's make it 300 million. What do you think? Seeing Jiang Hai put down the things in his hand with satisfaction, the person in charge here hesitated and reported the price of this batch of jewelry to Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai knew that if he auctioned this batch of jewelry, he could at least sell it for 100 million or even more. But there was a problem, and that was the problem of paying taxes. Also, if he wanted to sell these jewels, he would have to pay some commission. Counting all the money, he could probably get 200 million yuan in his hands. Now that he could get 300 million yuan, it was pretty good. No problem deal. After calculating in his heart, Jiang Hai also looked at Moses, Adams next to him. After Moses, Adams saw Jiang Hai's gaze. He handed over his mobile phone. There was a string of numbers on it. This was the price he estimated. 280 million. This was Moses, Adams's estimate. It was 20 million less than this price. This proved that the other party didn't lie to him this time. Moses, Adams really didn't sleep for a second tonight. He had been staring at these jewelry. From time to time, he took photos and sent them to the antique dealers he knew to estimate the price. Although it was not very proper to do this, this was the United States. It was not uncommon for Phillips to do this. He didn't sleep all night, but now he was in good spirits because he was already prepared. After all, he just got up yesterday afternoon. Even if he stared at it all night, his eyes were just a little red now. Chapter 306. It's indeed a pleasure to work with you. Seeing that Jiang Hai had agreed, the person in charge didn't hesitate. It was indeed very refreshing to work with Jiang Hai. From the bottom of his heart, Jiang Hai wasn't the kind of person who would hesitate over $10,000 or $100,000. If you asked him to spend the money on some strangers, he might not be happy, but it didn't matter now. After all, the two of them still had a big show that hadn't started yet. The armor was worth much more than the 300 million. When the two of them shook hands, his secretary had already drafted a document. After Moses Adams looked at it and confirmed that there were no problems, Jiang Hai signed his name on it. After Phillips's person in charge signed his name and stamped it with Phillips's seal, Jiang Hai's effect this time was considered complete. Phillips had bought Jiang Hai's jewelry for $300 million in private. Because it was a private purchase, there was no need to file tax returns, so Jiang Hai received the full amount. Of course, if Jiang Hai wanted others to know and file tax returns, the tax bureau wouldn't refuse. It was similar to private transactions in China, except that the amount was a little too big. After the jewelry was sorted and taken away, Jiang Hai's phone vibrated. His Centurion car had an extra balance of more than 20 million, and now there was an extra $321 million. This was Jiang Hai's current net worth. As the saying goes, if you have money at home, you won't panic. Jiang Hai had money in his pocket now, so he didn't panic. After keeping the phone, all that was left was the question about the armor. Jiang Hai authorized Phillips to auction it. After the auction, Phillips would take 3% of the money as commission. In addition, he would have to pay 35% of the tax. Originally, he would also have to pay state taxes, but Florida had an advantage. There was no income tax. If it was auctioned in New York, Jiang Hai would have to pay 15% more. Now that the 15% had been saved, it was good news that could not be discounted. In other words, apart from the commission and tax, Jiang Hai would get 62% of the profits from the armor. Although 1/3 was taken away, Jiang Hai's heart was still surging. After all, this was his chance to make the most money. After all, the experts estimated that the armor was worth $1 billion. This was only the lowest price, and it would definitely go up. Even if it was $1 billion, Jiang Hai would get more than $600 million. This was undeniably good news for him. After signing the entrustment agreement, Phillips began to prepare for publicity. The armor's auction would take place in a week. According to Phillips's words, such armor should at least be auctioned in the spring auction. The auction house was similar to the Fashion Week, but the Fashion Week was divided into 4 seasons. However, the auction house only had one season, which was the spring auction. They would save a year's worth of good goods and then auction them in the spring auction. Unfortunately, Jiang Hai couldn't wait that long. Therefore, they could only advertise for a week and then auction it directly. Although it was a pity, it wasn't difficult to tell rich people that they had good things in this era. After everything was settled, Jiang Hai and the others also left Phillips's office. Although everyone was a little sleepy, they were very excited after knowing that Jiang Hai had made a lot of money. Looking at the sunlight outside, Jiang Hai took out his phone and casually pressed a few buttons. Behind him, Moses Adams' phone rang. He took out his phone and saw that his balance was 2 million. Seeing this, Moses Adams couldn't help but look at Jiang Hai excitedly. This was a lot of money. This is the money I'm giving you this time. Do your best. Seeing Moses Adams looking over, Jiang Hai smiled. He had just made 300 million, and there was a bigger sum of money waiting for him. 2 million was actually not a lot. After all, he still had a lot of things to trouble Moses Adams. Moses Adams might seem to be having fun here all day long, but he was really busy. But in fact, he was really busy. Jiang Hai knew that this guy was definitely one of the top lawyers in Boston. There were countless cases that needed his help every day. The reason why he rushed over because of his phone call was that he wanted to curry favor with him, and also because they were closer. For such a friend, Jiang Hai was never stingy. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Moses Adams put his phone away. He didn't refuse Jiang Hai. Besides, in this world, there was no one who could refuse $2 million. Although he had a good relationship with Jiang Hai, work was work, and it couldn't be mixed with private matters. Looking at his smile, Jiang Hai also smiled. It was fine as long as the two understood in their hearts. They didn't need to say it out loud. Where are we going now? Seeing that Jiang Hai and Moses Adams had finished talking, Marian came over and tugged at Jiang Hai's clothes and asked curiously. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but roll his eyes at her. Go back to sleep. You haven't slept well for 2 days. Aren't you tired? Patting Marian's little head, Jiang Hai said with a smile. We're going back now? I was thinking that since we have nothing to do today, let's go to Disney. You promised us to go. Looking at Jiang Hai, Marian curled her lips helplessly. Compared to going out to play and going back to sleep, going to the amusement park was more in line with the mentality of a girl of her age. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but laugh. What's the hurry? We still have at least a week to stay here. We can go at any time these days. Orlando isn't far from here. Jiang Hai was telling the truth. Orlando was only more than 300 kilometers away from Miami. It was only a 3-hour drive. It wasn't very far, so Jiang Hai and the others were really not in a hurry. Okay then. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Marian was indeed a little sleepy. Seeing that Jiang Hai hadn't forgotten the agreement between them, she was relieved and couldn't help but yawn. Then, shall we go now? Seeing that Jiang Hai said that he wanted to go back to sleep, Aphrodite and the others didn't have as much energy as Daliana and Marian. They didn't rest well for 2 days in a row, and they were a little tired. No, let's eat something first before going back. I'm tired of the hotel's buffet. Let's change to something else. Jiang Hai and the others have been eating breakfast and dinner in the hotel these days, except for occasionally going out for lunch. Although the hotel's buffet is good, to be honest, the taste is not very good. It's okay to eat it once, but to let a picky guy like Jiang Hai eat it every day, he can't eat it anymore. After saying this, Jiang Hai swept around. After all, it was still morning, and it was not good to eat too much oil, so he was going to find some street snacks. He only saw that at this time, in front of an intersection on the street, there was a food car parked there. A Latin American woman was busy there with her husband and 2 children. Jiang Hai's eyesight was quite good. Although far away, Jiang Hai saw a lot of delicious food on the car. In addition to the most famous tacos here, there were also hot dogs and hamburgers. Seeing these things, Jiang Hai couldn't help but feel a little hungry. He said to Aphrodite and the others beside him, "You go get the car, I'll go buy something." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the others nodded, yawned, and were about to leave, but Aphrodite was not in a hurry to leave. After hesitating for a moment, she said to Jiang Hai, "Let me go with you. There's so many servings, it's not easy for you to carry." Hearing her words, Jiang Hai thought for a moment and nodded. Indeed, it was impossible for him to only buy his own. There were a total of 12 people here. Even if each person bought 2 servings, there would be a total of 24 servings. It was indeed a bit too much. It was not bad to have someone help him get it. Jiang Hai took Aphrodite to the stall. Seeing that there were guests, the man who was making pancakes couldn't help but raise his head, curl his tongue, and said with an excited face, "Welcome. What do you want to eat? Our pancakes here are absolutely the best. The sauce we use is imported from Mexico." Hearing the man's words, Jiang Hai also nodded. Indeed, the sauce used by these people has a Mexican logo on it. It doesn't look like the kind bought in the supermarket here. Jiang Hai really hasn't eaten such authentic burritos before. We want a total of 24 burritos. You have to make it faster." Hearing the words of the man in front of him, Jiang Hai couldn't help but say, "Okay." Hearing that Jiang Hai wanted so much, the man couldn't help but smile. This is a big job. Burritos, also known as tacos, are a traditional food in Mexico. They use a tortilla to stuff meat, vegetables, and so on. It's similar to hot dogs, but hot dogs use bread and burritos use tortillas. This tortilla is similar to the pancakes often eaten in the north of the country, but it is crisper than that kind of pancake. If there is a comparison, there's a kind of pancake fruit. This kind of pancake fruit is called mixed grain pancake. It has a thin layer and is very crispy. It's similar to this burrito, so these burritos are delicious and freshly made. Picking up a spoon, the man immediately picked up the pancake, and the woman helped to chop the filling. The stuffing in this thing is also very particular, and the variety and quantity are not ordinary. According to what everyone likes to eat, the stuffing is different, and of course the price is different. Chapter 307. The store really had everything. You could put beef patties, fried chicken fillets, fried meat slices, turkey slices, hot dog sausages, and stewed pork. Apart from that, there were also a lot of vegetables, lettuce, zucchini, celery, corn kernels, kale, onions, and even fried potato sticks. According to the price, one meat dish and two vegetables dish was $2. Every meat dish was $1, and a free vegetable dish was also given away. The portions weren't small, and there were a lot of things. It really did seem very affordable. What Aphrodite and the others wanted were the regular ones: beef patties and turkey slices. It was early in the morning, and they didn't want to eat fried food. The vegetables were red zucchini and lettuce. But compared to the low-quality ones they wanted, Jiang Hai wanted the high-quality ones. He wanted beef patties, turkey slices, fried meat slices, fried chicken fillets, and hot dog sausages. For the vegetables, he wanted lettuce, zucchini, and potato sticks. Jiang Hai's pancakes cost $6, and he asked for two. The stall owner was very happy. After preparing the things Jiang Hai and the others wanted, they waited for the male owner to sell the pancakes. Of the 24 pancakes, apart from the two Jiang Hai wanted, each was $2, which added up to $44. The two Jiang Hai wanted were $12, which added up to $66. Jiang Hai gave them $100, and there was no need for change. He was in a good mood today. With such a generous tip, the stall owner worked even harder. He even gave Jiang Hai and the others bigger and thicker pancakes. The female stall owner also quickly added another portion of the meat that had already been prepared. The pancakes that had already been spread out were wrapped up according to their initial distribution. After picking up the meat and vegetables, she even sprinkled sauce on them. This stall really had a complete set of sauces. There were a total of 6 sauces, all of which were salsa, the most famous sauces in Mexico. In this world, they were considered unique. The red sauce, which was a usual hot sauce, was made with tomatoes, red peppers, onions, garlic, and coriander. It tasted very hot and sour. The raw sauce was made with tomatoes, lime juice, red peppers, onions, and coriander. It was a little more sour than the red sauce. The green sauce was made with Mexico's special green tomatoes and peppers. It tasted a little more refreshing, but wasn't as spicy. In addition, there was guacamole, burrito sauce, mango salsa. Almost anyone who liked to eat this kind of or material could find a taste that he liked here. Jiang Hai, for example, preferred burrito sauce and red sauce because they were spicier. The others, on the other hand, all made burrito sauce. Soon, the first 22 servings were wrapped up, and it was Jiang Hai's turn to have his 2 oversized pancakes. When the female stall owner finished making Jiang Hai's pancake, Aphrodite couldn't help but be a little surprised. She really gave Jiang Hai face. Their pancakes were already double the amount of meat, but Jiang Hai's pancake still looked like it was at least 3 times bigger than theirs. She had to admit that these two people were really happy. Jiang Hai took the pancake and took a big bite. In an instant, the taste of the sauce, meat, and vegetables directly rushed into his mouth. In addition to the originally very crispy skin, Jiang Hai's eyes unconsciously curved. If there was anything similar between Jiang Hai and him a year ago, other than his face, it would probably be his sense of taste. He really likes to eat, especially delicious food. Like this thing, perhaps in the eyes of the upper class, it's nothing more than street food, but in Jiang Hai's eyes, it's a pretty good delicacy. Let's go. Seeing how happy Jiang Hai was eating, Aphrodite couldn't help but smile. She carried the rest of the things and waved at Jiang Hai. At this time, Moses Adams and the others had already driven out. They drove a total of 2 cars. In addition to Jiang Hai's MPV, there was also a car rented by Moses Adams. Although the MPV was a little crowded, these girls obviously wouldn't sit in Moses Adams' car. Thus, the 2 cars displayed a very strange scene. One side was almost crowded to death, while the other side only had 1 car. Seeing that the car was parked, Aphrodite prepared to return to the car first and give the food to these people. And Jiang Hai also knew. He nodded while eating and walked toward the MPV. But just as Jiang Hai left the stall and was about to go to the MPV, his eyebrows suddenly jumped for no reason. This made Jiang Hai instantly alert. At this moment, a car engine appeared in Jiang Hai's ears. Then, a car quickly drove across the intersection in front of them. When it saw Jiang Hai, not only did the car not slow down, it even sped up. Seeing this scene, the alarm bells in Jiang Hai's heart rang loudly. He instantly took a step forward and pushed Aphrodite, who was still in front of him, toward his MPV. Jiang Hai's strength was so great that in an instant, this push almost sent Aphrodite flying. The pancakes in her hand also fell to the ground at this time, but this force allowed her to get in immediately. Everyone in the MPV, who originally wanted to open the door to take the pancakes, was stunned for a moment. They completely didn't understand why Jiang Hai suddenly attacked Aphrodite. Aphrodite herself was also a little surprised. After getting into the MPV, she looked back with a puzzled expression, wanting to see why Jiang Hai was doing this. But when she turned back, she saw a car speeding toward Jiang Hai. Seeing this scene, all the girls covered their mouths in surprise. If this car hit an ordinary person, it would probably be over in an instant, but Jiang Hai was Jiang Hai. The child of a dimension was not a joke. Seeing that the car was only about 10 meters away from him and had no intention of slowing down at all, Jiang Hai secretly cursed, "Damn it!" At this speed, the car would reach him in less than a second. Jiang Hai didn't have much time left, but if he resigned himself to fate, that would not be Jiang Hai's way of doing things. In an instant, he jumped to the ground and rolled like a lazy donkey, dodging the front of the car by a hair's breadth. After the car missed Jiang Hai, it also spun and hit the curb on the left. The huge impact made the people in the car suffer a lot. But it was obvious that these people were already prepared because the moment the car was paralyzed, 4 people ran out of the car. These 4 people were all wearing safety helmets. It was obvious that the impact just now did not make them feel too uncomfortable. The only one who was affected was probably the driver. After these 4 people jumped out of the car, they reached behind them and 4 pistols appeared in their hands. Seeing these 4 people take out their guns, Jiang Hai's heart was also alarmed. Close the door. Seeing that Aphrodite and the others were already scared silly, Jiang Hai ran away in a flash. After all, Aphrodite and the others were not kind people in the past. They closed the door immediately, and Jiang Hai instantly ran to Moses Adams' car behind the MPV. Moses Adams' reaction was not slow. When he saw the people in front of him get out of the car, he immediately hid in the driver's seat. When he saw Jiang Hai running over, he did not forget to open the door of the front passenger seat and let Jiang Hai in an instant. And the moment Jiang Hai flashed into the car, there were thunderous gunshots outside the car. The 4 people wearing safety helmets had guns in their hands and kept shooting at Jiang Hai. This car rented by Moses Adams had almost no reaction and was riddled with holes by these people. But fortunately, this car was not a bad car to begin with. It was a Cadillac CTS. Although it was not expensive, the car still cost more than $100,000. It was not sold in China at all. So although its bulletproof ability was not strong, it was not particularly weak either. At least it was not comparable to these people's pistols. "Boss, who did you provoke this time?" Holding his head and lying in the driver's seat, Moses Adams asked Jiang Hai with some confusion. It was obvious that he was also scared this time. He had never encountered such an attack before. How would I know? These people, are they from the auction house? Don't they want me to take the money away? Jiang Hai, who was also holding his head and squatting there, couldn't help but shout loudly. He really couldn't think of where these people came from. The only thing he could think of was probably the auction house. It shouldn't be possible. But after listening to Jiang Hai's words, Moses Adams was not sure. Although Phillips was not the largest auction house and would occasionally cheat others, it was still the third largest auction house in the world after all. They also cared about their reputation. If this matter was spread out, who would come here to auction? That didn't seem likely. If not, why hasn't anyone come out to help yet? Maybe they heard Jiang Hai's words, but in Jiang Hai's slightly contemptuous voice, more than 20 security guards suddenly rushed out of the auction house in the distance. It had to be admitted that Jiang Hai was thinking too much. Although letting Jiang Hai take away the money made the people above Phillips a little uncomfortable, to put it bluntly, they were businessmen, not robbers. It was not worth it to cheat Jiang Hai of more than $1 billion and ruin their reputation. The reason why these people came out a little slowly was mainly because they had to report first. These people were specially left here by the auction house. After all, there were now jewelry worth $300 million and armor worth $1 billion here. If the other party was luring the tiger away from the mountain, the losses would be borne by them. However, Jiang Hai was their customer after all. If a customer was attacked as soon as he went out, they would be crazy to care. So it only took a minute for the person in charge to count the 20 security guards and go out with weapons to help. When the 4 people saw the 20 people coming out with weapons to help, they also panicked a little. Chapter 308. Retreat. The Phillips auction house was only a few dozen meters away from the place where Jiang Hai had an accident. When these people rushed out, the weapons in their hands were already in range. Many people had already opened fire. Compared to the small pistols in these people's hands, these security guards had big guns. Listening to the gunshots and feeling the bullets whizzing past them, the leader also knew that if they didn't leave now, they would die here. He immediately roared and wanted to leave, but how could it be so easy? Their car was already wrecked from the start. Now, the driver in the car was shaking his head as he climbed out of the car. He wanted to run now, but they didn't have a car. There were 2 cars in front of them that could run, but Aphrodite and the others were sitting in one of them. They had already locked the doors and windows, and Jiang Hai and Moses Adams were in the other one. How could it be that easy? Grab that MPV. Just as they were struggling, the driver who just got out of the car couldn't help but shout loudly. Hearing this voice, the other 4 bad guys rushed toward the MPV immediately. F*CK. They're going for Delina and the others. Do you have any weapons here? Seeing these people's actions, Jiang Hai, who had just breathed a sigh of relief because of the arrival of the security guards, instantly became angry again and asked Moses Adams loudly. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Moses Adams couldn't help but think for a moment. Then he took out a wrench. There is only this in the car, but there is a gun in the trunk. Handing the wrench to Jiang Hai, Moses Adams said to Jiang Hai. He knew that Jiang Hai's skills were not bad. Now his only chance of survival was in Jiang Hai's hands. Okay, go get it. Seeing that the people over there were almost in front of the MPV, Jiang Hai didn't care so much. He immediately opened the door and ran out, and Moses Adams also bent down to open the door and went to the trunk. At this moment, the fastest criminal had already arrived in front of the MPV. Of course, he couldn't pull the door open. After trying for a while, he smashed the car window with a punch and prepared to pull the car open from the inside. Unfortunately, the moment he stretched his hand in, Daliana, who had been hiding behind him, directly took out a modified knife and forcefully stabbed it into his hand. Although Daliana didn't have much strength, she was still able to stab a modified knife into his hand. The huge impact instantly pierced the man's hand and caused him to suffer a puncture wound. With a miserable cry, blood spurted out from his hand. His attempt to snatch the carriage was halted. As for the others, they originally thought that these women weren't a threat, but now they actually dared to fight back. They were simply courting death. They also raised their weapons in an instant. Seeing that these people were about to shoot, Jiang Hai had already arrived in front of the car. The wrench in his hand instantly smashed at the nearest gangster. Whoosh! The wrench was not small. It was thrown with Jiang Hai's full strength, plus the huge wind resistance, which caused a loud sound. The gangsters here were miserable. If they weren't wearing helmets, they might have a chance. But they were wearing helmets, so there was no way to hear it. With a bang, the wrench hit the gangster's head heavily. The huge impact of the wrench even directly smashed the gangster's helmet, and the gangster was also instantly smashed out, heavily hitting the other two gangsters who wanted to shoot. His head tilted, and no one knew whether he was dead or alive. Who the F***CK? Seeing that another one of his companions had fallen, the driver couldn't help but draw out his pistol at this time and shoot at Jiang Hai. But Jiang Hai had long been prepared for him. He raised his hand, and Jiang Hai rushed to the back of the MPV in front of him. He just avoided the gunman's shot. At this time, next to the Cadillac, Moses Adams had also taken out the gun case. Seeing his movements, Jiang Hai motioned him to throw the case directly. Without saying much, he threw the case directly and then hid behind the car. After Jiang Hai took the case, he immediately opened it. As the case was opened, a Beretta 92F appeared in his sight. Jiang Hai had also used this gun before. Immediately after loading the gun, Jiang Hai let out a long breath. This was the first time he used a gun to fight for his life. Take a hostage where you can't escape. Just as Jiang Hai was holding the gun, he suddenly heard the voice of the gangsters outside. When he heard this person's voice, Jiang Hai couldn't help but secretly curse. They are really shameless. But this gave him an opportunity. He suddenly stood up from his half-squatting body and directly smashed the window on the other side of the MPV. When Aphrodite and others were ready to fight for their lives, Jiang Hai opened half of the door. Get down! Just when Jiang Hai opened this half of the door, the other half of the door was already opened by the other side. Seeing that it was Jiang Hai, Aphrodite, and others didn't have time to think about what was going on. They instantly got down, and Jiang Hai also fired at this time. Sheila Rodney, who was slower to get down, even felt that the bullet flew over their heads. The people on the other side didn't expect Jiang Hai to open the door from the other side. In an instant, 6 or 7 blood flowers bloomed from the chests of the two gangsters who had just gotten up in front of the door. Jiang Hai didn't just shoot once, he shot continuously. Although the two gangsters protected their heads well, their bodies couldn't. In an instant, many bloody holes burst open. Their bodies went limp and the two fell to the ground. At this time, the gangster who was pinned to the door knew that if this continued, he would be dead for sure. So he endured the severe pain and actually pulled out the knife together with his hand. Then he fired continuously with his pistol. Feeling his attack, not only did Aphrodite and others get down, but Jiang Hai also dodged and got down on the ground. On the ground, Jiang Hai just happened to see the gangster's foot through the bottom of the car. Without saying anything, he directly shot the guy's ankle. The gangster only felt his foot go limp. He screamed and instantly fell to the side. He was really unlucky. His hand was stabbed first, then his foot was hit, but the worst was yet to come. As he fell to the ground, his eyes met with Jiang Hai's. Although he wanted to shoot in an instant, unfortunately, he was still half a beat too slow. Jiang Hai looked at the gangster and calmly pulled the trigger. The bullet almost instantly passed through his throat, bringing a burst of blood. His body couldn't help but droop down powerlessly. Who the F***CK? F***CK, eat more. I surrender. Seeing Jiang Hai take care of all his men in almost an instant, the driver who was still running over here couldn't help but curse, but he didn't fight to the death. Instead, he directly threw the weapon in the car aside and surrendered to the security guards who had rushed over. The security guards were not the police, so they were also a little confused at this time. The laws of the United States were not much different from those of Huaxia. Although you can defend yourself with a gun, if the other party surrendered, threw the gun away, or lost the ability to fight, it would still be troublesome to kill him in such a situation. Some people would even consider such a move as intentional homicide. So at this time, these security guards were a little confused, but at this time, Jiang Hai was already in a killing frenzy. He immediately got up from the ground, gun in hand, and walked over to the gangster over there. Jiang, he has already surrendered. You can't kill him. Seeing Jiang Hai's action, Moses Adams rushed over immediately and put his hands around Jiang Hai's waist and said with a serious face, he and Jiang Hai have worked together for a long time. He knows that Jiang Hai is furious at this time, but he is a lawyer. He must stop him. Let me go. Feeling Moses Adams's action, Jiang Hai couldn't help but shout loudly. There are surveillance cameras here. He has already surrendered. If you kill him, there will be trouble. Leave the rest to me. Just leave it to me. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Moses Adams also said loudly. He was really afraid that Jiang Hai would shoot. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai's originally angry eyes calmed down a little. He knew that in such a thing, this person's intentional murder would definitely not escape, but he was angry. How could Jiang Hai not be angry if he just let him go? Feeling Jiang Hai's hesitant gaze, the man shrugged and walked toward the security guard in front of him indifferently. Looking at his annoying look, Jiang Hai slowly pressed the muzzle of the gun. Suddenly, his hand pulled the trigger and a bullet instantly shot toward the man's thigh. The powerful firepower of the 92F made the bullet instantly tear his clothes and penetrate his flesh and bones. Although it did not penetrate, the man still screamed and fell into a pool of blood while covering his leg. Hearing the gunshot, Moses Adams, who was still holding Jiang Hai, could not help but be stunned. He immediately turned around to look at the man and found that the man was still moving. This proved that Jiang Hai did not kill him. At this time, Jiang Hai also walked in front of the man. I won't kill you, but I will let you die in prison. In order to let you live better in prison, I will give you a gift. Bang, bang, bang. As Jiang Hai's voice fell, the gun in Jiang Hai's hand pulled the trigger again. The other leg and two arms of the man who was still screaming were bitten by Jiang Hai's bullets at this time. His screams echoed in the street. He heard that Huaxia people, especially the rich people in Huaxia, were very law-abiding. He had already surrendered, so why did he still shoot? He felt that he had hurt his bones this time. He thought about how his hands and legs were useless. If he were to go to prison, he might as well just kill himself. That kind of life would be better. WWA, WWA, WWA. At this time, the ear-piercing alarm rang. Jiang Hai casually threw the gun to the side and looked at the man on the ground. He knew that this man was not the mastermind. This matter was not over yet. Chapter 309. Hey, it seems that you won't be able to sleep well tonight, Moses Adams said jokingly as he handed Jiang Hai a can of coffee. Jiang Hai just shrugged. He didn't care much about it. He opened a cup of coffee and drank it. He looked up at the clock hanging on the wall of the police station. At this time, the clock had pointed to 6. It was not 6 o'clock in the morning, but 6 o'clock in the evening. Since he left Philip's office in Miami in the morning, he had been in the police station for 8 hours. At this time, only he and Moses Adams were in the Miami police station. Delina and the others had already gone back at noon. After all, they were the complete victims of today's incident, so they could leave after finishing their statements. As for Jiang Hai, as a victim of this incident and a murderer, he needed to stay here for a while. Moses Adams, on the other hand, had been running around. In the morning, he was copying the video. In the afternoon, he took the time to make a statement. At the same time, he was also looking for evidence for Jiang Hai. In fact, there was no evidence to speak of, because whether it was the surveillance on the road, the surveillance of the auction house, or the civilian who set up the stall, or the car recorder, or the transcripts of the security guards, all proved that those people wanted to hit Jiang Hai. If they couldn't, they would get out of the car and shoot at Jiang Hai. The facts were very clear. The only thing that was not clear was that Jiang Hai shot the man after he surrendered. 3 of the 5 people who attacked Jiang Hai died. The first person who was hit by Jiang Hai with a wrench suffered from intracranial hemorrhage, skull fracture, and severe concussion. After the police arrived, he had been sent to the hospital. Moses Adams just sent news that the guy had cerebral palsy and would stay in bed for the rest of his life. The other person who survived was the one whose limbs were broken by Jiang Hai. This person was also a talent. After being sent to the hospital, he had an operation first. When he woke up at 6 o'clock in the afternoon, he said that he wanted to sue Jiang Hai. Today's incident became a different version of what had happened. He said that he and his 4 motorcycle enthusiasts were driving to a motorcycle club to have fun. On the way, his brakes failed. He almost hit Jiang Hai. After he stopped, his 4 friends got out of the car to see if Jiang Hai was all right. However, they realized that Jiang Hai was going to attack them. They were forced to fight back, but they were still beaten to death by Jiang Hai. In the end, he realized that the situation was not right and surrendered, but he was still beaten to such a state by Jiang Hai. He had to get the police to uphold justice for him. If they hadn't seen the surveillance with their own eyes, and if these guys didn't have criminal records, some of the police officers might have believed it, especially those who were more biased against Asians. After hearing Moses Adams' words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but be amused. He really knew how to twist facts. If he had been killed by them, perhaps it would have been an accident. The brakes of the car did fail, and these people did make an appointment to go to the motorcycle club on the phone. If there hadn't been a gunfight, and these people had killed him, then Jiang Hai would have died in vain. He had to admit that the person who planned to kill Jiang Hai, if he wasn't a repeat offender, then he really had some brains. Fortunately, the American police weren't all idiots. The surveillance video clearly showed that when these people hit Jiang Hai when they got out of the car, Jiang Hai hadn't gotten up yet. They directly took out the pistols at their waists and started shooting. If it was really like what he said, why did they carry guns with them? They didn't wait for Jiang Hai to attack, and before the others could react, they had already opened fire. Moreover, at the last moment, they still wanted to rob the MPV. They deserved to be killed by Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai had no problem killing the 4 people. The only problem was that Jiang Hai crippled the person. Today's matter won't be over so easily. Throwing the empty coffee can into the trash can next to him, Jiang Hai looked at his watch and said faintly to Moses Adams. Moses Adams naturally knew that when Jiang Hai said it wasn't over, he didn't mean that Jiang Hai wasn't finished. He had known Jiang Hai for more than half a year. When had Jiang Hai ever suffered such a big grievance? This time, the Grim Reaper's scythe almost landed on his head. No matter what, he couldn't let the other party go easily. I have no problem with legal matters. As for other things, I may not be able to do it. Hearing what Jiang Hai said, Moses Adams sighed. It's not that he didn't want to help, but because he was a lawyer, there were some things that he couldn't cross the line. I understand this. Tell me what's going on. I can't get anything from the police. We don't have any power here. If you want to take revenge, you have to rely on yourself. Looking at Moses Adams in front of him, Jiang Hai nodded. He had never suffered such a big loss. This time, no matter what, he wouldn't let the other party go easily. I heard that these people may have the power of the underworld in Miami. Many of them have criminal records, but I don't know who ordered them or why. But I think someone may know. Looking at Jiang Hai, Moses Adams lowered his voice and whispered. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai raised his eyebrows. This was what he wanted. Jiang Hai, you can go, but these days, don't leave the United States. When a case is heard, I still need your cooperation. Jiang Hai is a big taxpayer in Winthrop. Naturally, the police there are very kind to Jiang Hai, including the police in Boston. They don't dare to offend Jiang Hai. But here is Miami. No one will care about Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai didn't care about the cold attitude of the police because he didn't count on the police at this time. It is said that it is never too late for a gentleman to take revenge, but unfortunately, Jiang Hai is not a gentleman. He is a villain, so he will take revenge from morning to night. After leaving the police station, Jiang Hai called Aphrodite and told them that he was safe, then got into a Cadillac rented by Moses Adams. As Moses Adams started the engine, Jiang Hai followed him to the slums of Miami. On the way, he also told Jiang Hai where they were going. The place we're going to now is called Evil Ghost Bar. Last time, I got the gun and spear gun for you from here. I have a high school classmate who is now a supervisor here. But this person is not reliable. But for dollar's sake, they will get you whatever you want, Moses Adams said to Jiang Hai in the driver's seat. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai nodded secretly. He just wanted to know some information. Soon, as Moses Adams turned left and right, Jiang Hai and the others arrived at Evil Ghost Bar. This bar was located in the depths of the slums, but the hellish scene that Jiang Hai imagined was not here. On the contrary, the neighborhood was very prosperous, even comparable to those commercial districts, and there were many famous luxury cars on this block. Jiang Hai even saw a lot of Maseratis, Alfa Romeos, Ferraris, Porsches, and other cars parked on another street. The people walking on this block were also dressed in colorful clothes, and it was impossible to tell that this place was backward. This is sort of the middle point of the Miami area. It used to be as disgusting, dirty, and backward as other slums, but the boss here is a genius. After he consolidated the small gangs nearby, he cleaned up. Of course, it's not completely clean. It's better to say that it's gray than white, because there are a lot of underground casinos and high-end clubs here. Those who are involved in illegal activities don't dare to openly go to the city to play, so this is the best choice. While looking for a parking space, Moses Adams whispered to Jiang Hai. His car was not good here, of course it was not bad either. After parking the car, he led Jiang Hai to the bar in the middle of the street with the evil ghost mask hanging on it. However, not everyone could enter this place. Without Moses Adams, it was estimated that Jiang Hai would not be able to enter this place. After coming in, Jiang Hai found that this place was not like the nightclub he imagined. The wild music inside made people very uncomfortable. Men and women were going crazy. Although there were a lot of cheers here, it was very quiet and there was no music. As Jiang Hai turned a corner, he understood why. Because at this time in this big bar, there was no DJ or stage. Instead, there was a huge hexagonal iron cage. At this time, two strong men were standing in the iron cage, constantly tearing each other. There were no rules in this kind of fight. Unless one side surrendered or fainted, the game would continue. Even if someone died, they could only say that they deserved it. At this time, there were two people on the stage. One was a typical Westerner with a huge body, big head, and white skin. His arms were thicker than his head. He was 2 meters tall and also very intimidating. His opponent was an Asian who looked about 175 meters tall. Although his body was also muscular and unusually tight, it was not exaggerated. His hands were bandaged, and he habitually raised his right leg like a cobra, looking for an opportunity to attack. Jiang Hai knew these two fighting techniques. Bell had taught him before. The Westerners used wrestling, which was a very popular fighting technique in the United States. Articulation and throwing skills were very strong in all fighting events, but what he was facing was not an ordinary fighting technique. Chapter 310. Muay Thai, Thai boxing, belonged to Thailand's traditional fighting techniques. It was extremely lethal and was a sport known for its strength and agility. If one were to say that the world's major boxing techniques actually had their own specialties, Taekwondo was good at kicking, Rudo was good at joint techniques, wrestling was good at throwing, boxing was good at upper body punching and lower body small steps, Muay Thai was a fist technique that specialized in elbows, kicks, and close combat. Muay Thai's elbows could be said to be the heaviest elbows in the world. One elbow strike could even shatter a person's skull. As for their leg techniques, a long time ago, they were used to kick coconut trees by the beach. Only when a coconut tree was broken could they be considered to have reached the pinnacle of their leg techniques. Therefore, don't be fooled by the fact that the people who practiced Muay Thai were not considered to be tall and short in stature. Aside from their bones and muscles, their bodies were extremely resilient. Not only could they withstand attacks, but their attack power was also very strong. According to Bell, the most lethal fighting technique in the world was Muay Thai. However, Muay Thai was a little troublesome because it did not have any joint techniques. Therefore, when fighting, it would be more or less at a disadvantage. Especially in some gambling matches, the most open UFC had a lot of rules. Consecutive knee strikes were not allowed, and elbow strikes were not allowed. At the same time, a high whip kick to the back of the head was not allowed. In the world of Muay Thai, its ranking was not very high. Speaking of which, some martial arts fans might be unhappy. If they were talking about lethality, it would definitely be Hua Xia's Kung Fu that was the best. However, Huaxia's kung fu had a special characteristic. What could be passed on had been simplified and was considered to be half performance. The truly lethal kung fu was not passed on to outsiders. The idea of passing it on to males and not females made Huaxia's kung fu only exist in the hands of a few people. However, there was no way to promote these things. Suddenly, a loud shout from the ring attracted Jiang Hai's attention. At this time, the big white man in the ring attacked first. With a loud shout, his left hand turned into a claw and grabbed the man. This was also a wrestling gesture. As long as the opponent was caught, a series of throwing skills would follow. The opponent wouldn't even have time to react before being thrown to the ground. Jiang Hai's eyes were filled with disbelief. This Muay Thai expert wasn't joking. When he saw the person rushing over, he naturally knew that he couldn't be caught. Thus, he slipped and dodged the man's hand. At the same time, his leg whipped towards the man's left rib. With a bang, the big man took a kick from the master, but he didn't retreat. Instead, he endured the pain and grabbed the man's ankle with his empty right hand. With one hand, he threw the Muay Thai master into the iron cage next to him, causing the cage to shake. As for the audience outside the arena, they couldn't help but scream because of this violent scene. For them, this was what they came to see. I'm interested. We can place our bets later, but let's go and order some drinks first. Moses Adams couldn't help but smile when he saw Jiang Hai staring at the ring intently. Men always had no resistance to this kind of blood-boiling battle. However, they weren't here today to watch the competition. They're such a fun place. You didn't bring me here to play before, Jiang Hai said to Moses Adams as he reluctantly looked at the Muay Thai master and got up again. This place was indeed very interesting. Forget it, boss. You have so many pairs of eyes staring at you. Would I dare to bring you here? If it's just you and me next time, then it's fine. Moses Adams waved his hand when he heard Jiang Hai's words. Aphrodite and the others weren't joking. Jiang Hai could ignore them, but he couldn't. After all, these women were Jiang Hai's people. There will be a chance. Thinking that Aphrodite and the others had been watching him closely recently, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile awkwardly. However, he would definitely come here again in the future, so he wasn't in a hurry. Hey, Moses, you're here again. Is the guy I gave you last time good? Moses Adams and Jiang Hai just came from the big bar, and a man who looked about the same age as Moses Adams came over with a big belly. He handed him a glass of whiskey and said with a smile, such a big lawyer naturally wouldn't owe him money for drinks. I'm driving tonight, and I'm going back tonight. Forget about the drink. Boss, are you interested? Moses Adams pushed the glass in front of him forward and said to the man opposite him, then asked Jiang Hai, just to calm down. Jiang Hai didn't hold back. After casually stuffing $100 bill into the money box next to him, he picked up the glass of whiskey in front of him and directly drank it without putting any ice in it. Most of the whiskey in Miami was produced in South America, which was slightly different from the whiskey in Boston. The whiskey in Boston was produced in Canada or the United States. Maybe the raw materials were different, so it was mellower. But here, there was a hint of sweetness. To be honest, Jiang Hai still preferred the whiskey here. At least it didn't taste so bad in the mouth. What a generous boy. Looking at Jiang Hai in front of him, the big man on the other side couldn't help but laugh. Well, John, let me introduce you. This is my boss. We are not here to drink today. I have something to ask you. Hearing the big man's happy look, Moses Adams knocked on the table, then put a roll of whiskey on the bar, but he didn't give it to the man. Instead, he asked first, "Tell me, I'll see if it's worth this price." At a glance, the man named John had already seen the amount of money in this roll of whiskey. If he guessed right, it should be $1,000. As a big lawyer, he is more generous than the average person. Don't worry, you will definitely be satisfied with this price. I want to know the news of Greyhound Terry. Pushing his glasses up, Moses Adams asked. The Greyhound Terry he mentioned was the driver who hit Jiang Hai today. This man's original name was Terry Anderson, but after Moses Adams asked, the police told him that this guy's other name was the name he used to hang around here. Greyhound Terry? He's just a nobody. We're all old classmates. He's only worth this much. Hearing Moses Adams' words, the man smiled and stretched out 2 fingers, indicating that the news of this guy is only worth $200. I have other things to ask you. But Moses Adams didn't take the money back, but directly threw the roll of money to him and asked, Jiang Hai didn't come here just to catch small fish this time. This Greyhound Terry is a gangster around here. He used to steal cars. After he went in a few times, he met a leader in Miami named Justin Parker. Now he can be regarded as a small leader. He usually fights and sells flour. I know you definitely don't want to hear his news, so I'll tell you a little more for the sake of these dollars. Picking up the money in front of him, John smiled and continued to talk to Jiang Hai. The man who hit Jiang Hai today is just a nobody. Such a guy. Even if you give him 10 times the courage, he wouldn't dare to hit Jiang Hai. As soon as they heard the name Jiang Hai, they knew that the person who wanted Jiang Hai's life should be this guy named Justin Parker. Jiang Hai is also a F***king dog. How can he be like this? Every time he leaves Winthrop, he has to run into a guy named Justin. But last time at most, he was embarrassed, but this time, he was going to lose his life. Terry wasn't a powerful person, but this Justin Parker wasn't someone to be trifled with. This kid is a mix of black and Latin American. He was an orphan since childhood. He was very ruthless. When he was in the orphanage, he once stabbed a child older than him to death. Because of this, he was sent to juvenile detention. Later, he married the son of a Colombian tycoon. After they were sent out together, he worshipped this big brother as his godfather. But a wolf cub can't be raised well. About 5 years ago, this guy first killed this big brother's son, then killed this big brother, and took over many of this big brother's businesses. Although he is not the most famous person in this area, his wealth is worth tens of millions. However, his net worth was also in the tens of millions. He had dozens of underlings under him and managed several blocks. Recently, I heard that he is very close to a rich second generation from Huaxia. That person provided him with funds and let him start to occupy the entire gray area of Miami. Recently, many bosses have been studying how to get rid of him. Looking at Jiang Hai and Moses Adams, this person couldn't help but whisper with a smile. Hearing this, Jiang Hai's frown unconsciously loosened. He was originally very surprised because since he came here, he didn't seem to have any conflicts with the locals. The only time he had a conflict was when he bought the yacht. But a manager who sold the yacht was not arrogant enough to hire a hitman to kill him. So when this person mentioned Justin Parker, Jiang Hai was very puzzled, because in his memory, he didn't seem to have any relationship with these gray areas. But now he suddenly understood. The rich second generation from Huaxia, needless to say, is Qin Fun. After being beaten by me, this guy seems to be very dishonest. He even dares to do such a thing behind my back. Seeing Jiang Hai's narrowed eyes, Moses Adams also smiled. He knew that every injustice has its perpetrator, and every debt has its debtor. This time, he had found the debtor. As for Jiang Hai, he picked up the wine glass in front of him and drank the contents of the glass in one big gulp. Boss, if you want revenge, I shouldn't interfere, but you still need to consider the method. The other party has dozens of underlings. Seeing Jiang Hai's appearance, Moses Adams also said softly, "This matter is really not easy to handle. I remember that in the gray area, there seems to be a saying that money can solve this problem. Where is it?" Chapter 3:11. Here is fine. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, John shrugged. This was the middle of the gray area. Naturally, they would accept some special jobs. For example, if someone wanted to hire a hitman to kill someone, they liked such big clients very much. That's the best. 10 million for the head of Justin Parker. No matter who it is, if he brings his head here, 10 million is his. 20 million for the head of the Huaxia. Similarly, no matter who brought it, take it away for 20 million. Jiang Hai looked at John in front of him and poured himself another glass of whiskey. While smelling the strong alcohol smell of the whiskey, Jiang Hai said the above paragraph as if he was sleep-talking. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, John on the opposite side was stunned. Taking out 30 million just to kill 2 people? If this guy is not bullshitting, then he is really rich. Boss, isn't your price a bit too high? Although Moses Adams had nothing to do with these gray areas, It was essential for him to understand the market conditions of various periods, so he also knew the prices here. Even if these two people had a lot of power, 30 million for their lives was really a bit of a fuss. It doesn't matter. The money is worth it. Jiang Hai couldn't deal with the other party himself. First, the police were watching him now. Second, he didn't think that he was now a match for dozens of armed robbers. If he could spend money to solve the problem, then it was naturally the best. Anyway, he was not short of money now. Are you sure? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, John's breathing became heavy. For him, no. Even for the people behind him, 30 million was a lot of money. I'm very sure. I'll leave this matter to you. Hearing John's words, Jiang Hai looked at him and nodded seriously. He then turned to Moses, Adams beside him, and said something to him. I'll be staying here for another week to 10 days. I hope to resolve this matter during this period of time. Jiang Hai said softly as he gently knocked on the bar counter. Then the three of them looked at each other and couldn't help but laugh. For some people, not to mention 10 days, 3 days was more than enough. Less than half an hour later, Jiang Hai and Moses, Adams left the place. When they passed by the iron cage again, the two men were already spent. The white man's face was disfigured, his nose was fractured, one of his eyes could no longer be opened, and several of his ribs were broken. One of his front teeth was knocked out, and his head was covered in blood. At this time, he was leaning against the iron cage, gasping for breath, while the Muay Thai master opposite him was already lying on the ground, looking at his tightly shut eyes and his bent arm. If it wasn't for his undulating chest, it was almost certain that this person was already dead. But even if he wasn't dead now, this person probably wouldn't be able to get out of bed without at least a year of rest. And this white man, although he won, his situation wasn't much better than the person lying on the ground. After taking a look at the white man, Jiang Hai turned around and left. Unfortunately, he didn't see the good scene just now. That night, Jiang Hai and Moses, Adams drove back to the hotel. After returning to the hotel, they found that Aphrodite and the others were in their rooms and didn't go back to rest. When they saw Jiang Hai come back, they all stood up nervously, especially Delina and Marion. The two girls immediately ran over and hugged Jiang Hai. To be honest, today's scene was too scary. Okay, I'm fine now, aren't I? Good girls, have you eaten yet? If not, ask them to send it up. Touching the hair of the two girls, Jiang Hai said slowly. He knew that today's incident had indeed caused an indelible psychological trauma to these girls. It seems that as a father, he really didn't take advantage of his position. Ahem, boss, I'll go back first. You can continue. Looking at the scene in front of him, Moses, Adams smiled awkwardly, then turned and left Jiang Hai's room. He felt embarrassed standing in Jiang Hai's room. Oh, okay. Help me look after tonight's matter. I won't treat you badly. Hearing Moses Adams' words, Jiang Hai also turned his head and said to him with a soft smile. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Moses Adams also nodded and respectfully left the room and returned to his room. Just as he closed Jiang Hai's door, the other girls, like Delina and Marion, rushed up and hugged Jiang Hai tightly, as if they were really afraid of losing him. Ahem, don't be like this. Let me sit down first. Feeling his body getting heavier and heavier, Jiang Hai couldn't help but cough twice. Hearing Jiang Hai's cough, the girls reacted and let Jiang Hai sit on the sofa over there. However, they still refused to leave Jiang Hai. Delina and Marion hugged Jiang Hai's arms tightly from both sides, not letting go. Jenny and Bridget sat on the carpet, one of them hugging Jiang Hai's leg, while Ohilia and Shira firmly held Jiang Hai's hands. As for Becky and Hilda, they hugged Jiang Hai's shoulders. Dana was more direct and directly hugged Jiang Hai's waist. The pair of fully grown things just happened to press on Jiang Hai's lower abdomen, making Jiang Hai feel a little embarrassed. But before he had the time to feel embarrassed, Aphrodite had already walked behind him and hugged Jiang Hai's neck from behind. The pair of fully grown things just happened to be at the back of Jiang Hai's head, making it difficult for Jiang Hai to relax or exert force. After all, if he exerted force, it would be easy for problems to arise. I say, I'm fine, right? You're fine too, aren't you? Have you eaten anything? Let's order some food. Feeling the softness coming from all directions, Jiang Hai couldn't help but say helplessly, "We can't eat." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Aphrodite, who was hugging Jiang Hai's head, said to Jiang Hai with a slightly sobbing tone, "If you haven't lost something, you won't know how to cherish it." These girls went from having nothing in the past to becoming what they were now. This kind of life was something they had never dreamed of before. It could be said that the life by Jiang Hai's side now was not an exaggeration to say that it was heaven. At least, it was so in their eyes. They could talk happily every day, work hard, eat delicious food, and have Jiang Hai stuffed in their hearts. They had beautiful clothes to wear, good sisters by their side, and they didn't have to look at anyone's face. This kind of life could only be considered good in the eyes of ordinary people, but in the eyes of these girls, it was already the best. It was precisely living in this kind of environment that made them all the more reluctant. If anything happened to Jiang Hai, to them, Jiang Hai was really their everything. In the past, apart from Aphrodite, the other girls' feelings for Jiang Hai were mostly to repay his kindness. But after this time, it had slowly changed. Now, in their eyes, Jiang Hai was not only their benefactor, but also their meal ticket. After this time, they finally understood that Jiang Hai's position in their hearts was very important. If there were only 100 things in their hearts, then Jiang Hai already occupied more than 80. This kind of feeling wasn't love, nor was it liking, but it was more than liking. This kind of dependence made them completely unable to imagine what would happen to them if something happened to Jiang Hai. "Then what do you want to do? This can't go on forever. How about you all go back to sleep?" Hearing that the girls didn't want to eat, Jiang Hai didn't know what to say. After hesitating for a moment, he could only say this: "We don't want to go back. I'm scared. I want to sleep with you." But after listening to Jiang Hai's words, the reaction of the 10 girls became even more intense. Aphrodite and the others didn't say anything, but Delina and Marion had already raised their heads. Their big eyes were filled with tears. Seeing this, Jiang Hai couldn't help but feel helpless. But this is not good. Hearing the girls' thoughts, Jiang Hai couldn't help but helplessly say, "I don't care. We just want to sleep with you." Hearing Jiang Hai's tangled words, Marion also threw a tantrum. But to be honest, in this situation, they really didn't dare to go back to sleep. Feeling the girls' firm hearts, Jiang Hai helplessly sighed. If it's a blessing, it's not a curse. But if it's a curse, it can't be avoided. "Then, where are we going to sleep?" "On the sofa, that's it. Go back to the room and sleep." Looking at the girls around him who were like frightened bunnies, Jiang Hai helplessly shrugged. The girls listened to his words, nodded, and followed Jiang Hai back to the room. Lying on Jiang Hai's big bed, the originally very big bed couldn't accommodate 11 people. The 11 people were almost tightly squeezed together, but they didn't have a trace of impatience. Smelling Jiang Hai's scent, these girls could finally sleep peacefully. As for Jiang Hai, he was also a little sleepy. Although his nose was full of the girl's scent, which made Jiang Hai's heart pound, he couldn't really move. While Jiang Hai was sleeping soundly here, things became complicated on the gray streets of Miami. Son of a B asterisk TCH, who the F asterisk CK, 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 F asterisk CK. Angry shouts came from the second floor of a nightclub, accompanied by the sound of things being smashed. There was almost no one in the most popular nightclub at this time, because this was Justin Parker's base camp. Half an hour after Jiang Hai and Moses Adams left, the news that Justin's head was worth $10 million had spread throughout Miami. Although the tycoons in Miami did not care about $10 million, who would complain about money? Chapter 3:12. Bastard, bastard, bastard. How dare you cheat me like this? How is this a fat sheep? This is clearly a fierce tiger. 10 million. Even I, Justin Parker, have a time when my head is worth 10 million. Grabbing the ashtray in his hand, the half-brown-skinned man slammed it to the ground and roared loudly in English with a clear Spanish accent. At this time, The other two lackeys in the room couldn't help but hide far away in fear of being caught in the crossfire. Boss, it's no use throwing a tantrum now. I reckon those people who came to kill you are almost here. You have to think of a way. Why don't we go into hiding first and lie low in Colombia for a while? One of the lackeys couldn't help but ask in a low voice when he saw that the crazy boss seemed to have calmed down after throwing everything out. That's all we can do for now, but that guy's worse off than me. I can run, but can he? Justin Parker helplessly rubbed his temples and couldn't help but snort coldly. The person he was talking about was naturally Qinfen. Just as Jiang Hai thought, Qinfen had no intention of stopping. After Jiang Hai injured him, Jiang Hai knew that Qinfen wouldn't stop so easily, so he specially called Qili. Qili also knew the importance of adding insult to injury, so she called the Qin family's rivals. The Qin family immediately arranged for a special police team to go to Miami to arrest Qinfen. But it had to be said that Qinfen was really lucky. He was discharged on the third day, and the special police arrived on the night of his discharge, leaving them only an empty ward. After avoiding the special police team and using Dollar to open a path, Qinfen began to implement his plan after meeting Justin Parker. Although this guy was a second-generation rich kid, he wasn't particularly stupid. While he was taking revenge on Jiang Hai, he also wanted to use the money in his hands to take root here. Jiang Hai's incident told him that no matter where you were, having your own power was the most important. Others were unreliable. Therefore, after he approached Justin Parker, he became his partner. He was responsible for providing the money, and Justin Parker would control the other streets here. If the time came and they broke into a huge gray world, he would not ask to control it. He only needed this gray world to protect him and get a share of the profits. Since there was such a good thing, Justin Parker naturally agreed. It was not that he had never thought of taking advantage of the situation, but there were 4 domestic soldier kings as bodyguards in addition to a few Blackwater security guards. With the dozens of people in his hands, if he wanted to take down this group of people, even if he won, he would lose all of them. Under such circumstances, cooperation was the best choice. And their cooperation naturally needed proof of their allegiance. Qinfen's proof of allegiance was $1 million in cash. If Justin Parker couldn't afford it, then he would help Qinfen kill Jiang Hai. That was why today's incident happened. They had to admit that they had underestimated Jiang Hai. If it wasn't Greyhound Terry's group of 5 who came today, but Justin Parker and the others, they would have been taken out by the police. Do you think the police in Miami are so incompetent? A gang like this would definitely have surveillance cameras. In any case, Justin Parker knew that he had kicked an iron plate this time. He was really in trouble this time. Contact the ship immediately. I'll leave tonight. Thinking of his underling's words, Justin Parker sighed and stood up. He knew that once he left, his territory and business here would all be gone. But what could he do? Compared to Earth and business, life was obviously more valuable. $10 million for his life. Not to mention others. He was very tempted when he heard the 10 million. If it weren't for the fact that he only had one life, he even wanted to exchange his head for money. That was $10 million. But it was too late to say anything now. He had no other choice but to sigh. After instructing his underling, Justin Parker stood up and was about to go out. His underling also picked up his hat and walked over. But just as he handed the hat to Justin Parker, a switchblade appeared in his hand. Feeling that the corner of his eye caught a glimmer of light, Justin Parker, who had many years of experience in fighting, also felt the danger and retreated in an instant, but it was still a step too late. The other party's knife had already slashed over. With a rip, Justin Parker's clothes, together with his stomach, were instantly ripped open. Sauronyu, looking at the knife in his hand and his underling who was still bleeding, Justin Parker was shocked. "Boss, your head is worth $10 million. They said that no matter who takes your head, they can get $10 million. Boss, you also know the situation in my family. I have a mother who is addicted to drugs, a girlfriend who is a special service person, 2 younger brothers, and a younger sister. Boss, I don't want to mingle anymore. I want a new life, so, boss, I'm sorry." Looking at Justin Parker in front of him, this underling kept talking. Looking at his trembling body, he knew that it was not easy for him to make this decision. There was no absolute loyalty in this world. The only thing that mattered was whether the price was high enough. Husband and wife were birds in the same forest. When disaster struck, they would fly away separately, let alone an underling. You bastard. Looking at his underling's appearance, Justin Parker was not to be trifled with. He immediately pulled out a pistol from behind him and shot 3 times at the underling who was about to pounce on him. After the gunshots ended, the underling fell into a pool of blood. Then Justin Parker covered the wound on his stomach while pointing the gun at the remaining underling. However, this underling did not seem to have any disloyalty. At this time, he was scared silly. Seeing the boss pointing the gun at him, he immediately raised his hands, and a foul smell came from his crotch. "Boss, don't kill me. This has nothing to do with me. I'm loyal to you." Hearing this person's words, Justin Parker could not help but hesitate because he could see that this person was indeed not a threat. Although the attack just now did not cut open his stomach, it still made him bleed. After a while, he felt a little dizzy. Now, he really needed a helper. "Don't talk nonsense. I know you're loyal. Now hurry up and get the car. If I can escape this time, then you will be my #1 confidant." Putting down the gun, a trace of fatigue flashed across Justin Parker's face as he said to the lackey. Of course, the latter sentence was just a pie in the sky. Right now, he had no one to trust. "Okay, boss." Hearing Justin Parker's words, the underling immediately ran out of the room, and Justin Parker sat powerlessly on the chair. Looking at his bleeding stomach, he took out a stapler from the cabinet and forcefully stapled the wound together. He had to admit that this kind of person was not an ordinary kind of ruthless. After stapling the wound, he tore off a new set of clothes and wrapped the wound up. At this time, the sound of a car horn came from outside. Taking a deep breath, Justin Parker walked down from upstairs and arrived at the entrance of the nightclub. This surprised him because he did not see a car. Just as he was puzzled, 2 headlights suddenly lit up. He squinted his eyes and looked back. He saw a car speeding towards him. He didn't even have a chance to react. The car hit him at full speed and sent him flying. Before flying, he only saw the ferocious face of the underling in the driver's seat who had been scared to the point of wetting himself. While Justin Parker's soul had already returned to hell, Qin Feng's situation was not too good either. It had to be known that Justin Parker, the boss, was only worth $10 million, while his head was worth $20 million. Those people would not let go of $10 million, let alone $20 million, so there were even more people on his side who wanted to kill him. Even the bodyguards of Blackwater were looking at him with a strange look. This made Qin Feng very afraid, very afraid. But no matter how afraid he was, there was nothing he could do. Right now, the only people he could trust were the 4 people he had brought over from China. After all, their families were still in China, and he had chips to blackmail them. At this time, Qin Feng was holed up in his hiding place. Hearing the gunshots outside from time to time, he was really panicking this time. For the first time in his life, he felt some regret. Why did he have to provoke Jiang Hai when he had nothing better to do? Was Jiang Hai so easy to provoke? Who would have thought that such an ordinary-looking man would be so rich? With America, there's nothing money can't do. Recalling what his father had said to him when he left, Qin Feng felt very regretful and helpless. He did not know if he would be able to leave this place alive this time. "Young master, the people from Blackwater will help you hold the front for the time being. We've already arranged a ship for you. Let's go to South America tonight." At this moment, the door to his room opened. The bodyguard who had been beaten up like a pig by Jiang Hai rushed in from outside and spoke to Qin Feng as he ran. "Then what are we waiting for? Let's go." Ignoring the pain in his ribs, Qin Feng did not say much. He shouted and was about to leave. "Young master, this way." Hearing Qin Feng's words, a sharp light flashed in this person's eyes, and he pointed in the direction of the back door. Qin Feng didn't think too much about it and turned around to leave. Just as he turned his back to this person's hand were fixed on Qin Feng's head. Just as Qin Feng was about to scold this guy, he felt a pain in his neck. In an instant, the view in front of his eyes turned 108 degrees. In the end, he only saw the bodyguard directly behind him. Before he could understand how he saw his bodyguard, his body had already collapsed powerlessly. It was still the same sentence. There was no such thing as absolute loyalty in this world. Whether or not one would betray depended on whether or not one had enough bargaining chips. Chapter 313. A strange feeling invaded the nerves in Jiang Hai's brain. He, who was still in a sleeping state, instantly opened his eyes. He first looked around and found that Delina, Marion, and the other women were still sleeping beside him like last night. But when he looked down, he found that Aphrodite had woken up at some point and was playing with something. Seeing that Jiang Hai was awake, she couldn't help but smile awkwardly. What are you doing?" Seeing Aphrodite's appearance, Jiang Hai subconsciously wanted to yell. At the same time, he immediately pulled his body back and pulled up his pants that had already been pulled down. But when he remembered that there were other women beside him, Jiang Hai couldn't help but lower his voice and look at Aphrodite with some surprise. What am I doing? Isn't it obvious?" Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Aphrodite's face couldn't help but redden, but she didn't say anything shyly. Instead, she mustered up her courage and deliberately crawled towards Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai didn't notice that Aphrodite had already taken off her jacket at some point. Now, she only had one piece of underwear on her body. Her voluptuous upper body was firmly encircled by the singlet, creating an abnormally deep ravine. In between her slender waist and slender legs, there was only a very small pair of pants that matched the singlet. The way she crawled forward was indescribably seductive. Moreover, the two of them were in intimate contact just now. "You're wrong." Seeing Aphrodite crawling over, Jiang Hai couldn't help but say weakly, "I know, but I just can't control myself. I'm willing to give you everything. I don't ask you to give me any status. I don't need to be your wife, nor do I need to be your lover. Your job. When you need it, you can use me from head to toe." Seeing that Jiang Hai was somewhat retreating after yesterday's crisis, Aphrodite, who had already thought things through, was ready to take the initiative and crawl closer and closer to Jiang Hai. No, there are others." Looking at Aphrodite's serious expression, Jiang Hai cursed in his heart. He retreated while whispering, but it was obvious that this matter couldn't convince Aphrodite. "It doesn't matter. Maybe you feel wrong, but everyone here, including Delina and Marion, actually has the same feelings for you. You don't need to care, and I won't care either." After hearing Jiang Hai's words, Aphrodite continued, "Sister Aphrodite, what are you guys doing?" Perhaps because Aphrodite's voice was a little too loud, she couldn't help but wake up Delina on Jiang Hai's left. Delina opened her eyes in a daze and asked curiously, I need to go to the toilet." The moment Delina woke up, Jiang Hai and Aphrodite were stunned for a moment, and Jiang Hai also suddenly said at this time, then in a flash, jumped off the bed and went to the toilet. And Aphrodite looked at Jiang Hai's back and couldn't help but curl her lips. She didn't succeed this time. She didn't know when the next chance would come. She felt that Jiang Hai was not uninterested in her. He was very interested in her, but for some reason, he didn't act like a man and pounce on her. This made Aphrodite feel a little gratified in her heart, but also a little helpless. She was gratified because Jiang Hai really valued her, so he wouldn't hurt her. And she was helpless. In fact, in the deepest part of her heart, she really liked Jiang Hai, but she hoped that Jiang Hai would hurt her. When the sound of Jiang Hai taking a shower came from the toilet, all the girls woke up. After sleeping last night, these girls had recovered a lot. When Jiang Hai came out, they went in to wash up one by one. After everything was done, everyone went downstairs to eat breakfast. Originally, Aphrodite and the others had suggested that they should check out of the other rooms and stay in Jiang Hai's room. But at this time, Jiang Hai, who was already alarmed, didn't agree. What a joke. It was okay to sleep like this for one night, but to sleep like this every day, it would kill. So under Jiang Hai's insistence, they all went back to their rooms. When breakfast was almost finished, Moses Adams came down with a yawn. Jiang Hai slept very well that night, but he almost didn't sleep at all because Justin Parker's bounty had been claimed by someone else in the first half of the night. In the second half of the night, Qin Fen's bounty had also been claimed, which meant that the game between the two of them was over. After telling this news to Jiang Hai didn't care. If the 30 million was gone, then it was gone. He didn't care. But if he didn't kill these two guys, he really wouldn't be happy. Now that they were dead, although it was a pity that Jiang Hai didn't do it himself, it still made him feel relieved. Now they can have some fun. After resting in the hotel for another day, Jiang Hai still remembered what he had promised Alina and the others the next day. The next day, they sat in a minibus that Jiang Hai had specially rented and drove to Orlando. The people in China were familiar with Orlando because of a team here, the Orlando Magic. In the NBA, the first center was Shaquille O'Neal. After Shaquille O'Neal was Yao Ming, and at the end of Yao Ming's career, the first center to succeed him was Orlando Magic's Hua Zhongqing. But later, it turned out that this guy wasn't as loyal as he said. But to be honest, Orlando wasn't a place that attracted star players because it was too small. Orlando was a city in the central part of Florida. It was located on a swamp, and the entire city's population was only 220,000. In China, a bigger town had more people than the city. But even so, this was still one of the biggest land masses in Florida. It was the seat of Orange County, and this place was called Orange County. It was indeed a little like a citrus. It was the largest citrus fruit distribution center in the United States. There weren't any manors or ranches nearby. 90% of the farmers grew oranges, and the oranges here were quite good. It was very appropriate to say that they were sold abroad. In China, many oranges imported from the United States, such as blood oranges, were produced here. Of course, most of them were actually from Lu province, but the variety was imported from there. Otherwise, it would be too expensive to import an orange from there. But he had to admit that the oranges here were really delicious. After buying some oranges on the roadside, Jiang Hai even had the idea of transplanting a few of them back. But don't underestimate Orlando. It was the most famous tourist city in the United States. The world's largest Disneyland, Universal Studios, Ocean World, Kennedy Space Center, and Harry Potter's Magic World were all here. It could be said that this city wasn't big, but it had a lot of fun. Jiang Hai didn't check out of his room in Miami, but it didn't prevent him from playing here for a few more days. Compared to the profit he made this time, it didn't matter if his room was empty for a few days. Rich people could be so capricious. After driving from Miami to Orlando, Jiang Hai picked a 5-star hotel to check in. After a day of playing in downtown Orlando, Jiang Hai and the others went to Orlando Disneyland the next day. This Disneyland started to receive guests in 1971, and in 1971, it invested $400 million. The whole park covered a total of 124 square kilometers, with 4 super large theme parks, namely Disneyland's Future, Disneyland's Animal Kingdom, Disneyland's Hollywood Studios, Disneyland's Magic Kingdom, Third Water Park, 32 resort hotels, and 784 campsites. They had to admit that this was a really big place. Jiang Hai and the others were only planning to play here for a day, but after a day, they had just finished visiting a theme park. This place was really too big, so after hesitating for a while, they checked out of their room in Orlando and stayed in a hotel in Disneyland. The next day, the third day, they still played here. After a total of 3 days, they probably finished all the things here. In the past few days, even with Jiang Hai's physical fitness, he couldn't bear it. After playing in Disneyland, they didn't rush back, but continued to play in Harry Potter's Magic World. This place was a theme park jointly established by Warner Brothers and Universal Studios. Compared to Disneyland, this place was much smaller. It was only 787 acres, or about 3 square kilometers. It was a very small place, and there were only 2 main places to play. One was Hogwarts Castle, and the other was Hogsmeade Village. The former was where Harry Potter taught, and it was also the starting point of many events. The latter was the small village that Harry Potter once sneaked into with his invisibility cloak. Jiang Hai didn't read all of Harry Potter, because when he first came out of Harry Potter, he didn't like reading. Later, he started to like reading novels, and he had reached the age where he didn't read Harry Potter. As for the movie, he had only watched the first one. After playing there for a day, they went to the Kennedy Space Center. This is the place where space shuttles are launched. They can come here to watch. To be honest, Jiang Hai has seen satellite launches on TV before, but this is the first time he can see a space shuttle launch with his own eyes. They were lucky when they came here. It just happened that the launch would take place the next day. That night, Jiang Hai and the others deliberately stayed in the minibus. The next day, after seeing the space shuttle launch, Jiang Hai couldn't help but open his mouth wide with emotion. Although it wasn't launched by his countrymen, the shock really made Jiang Hai sigh. Human beings had now begun to compete for the universe. The universe was about to be conquered, so how long could the mystery of the seabed remain? It seemed that he had to speed up his pace. Chapter 314. Hi, John, welcome. You look really handsome in formal wear. Opening his arms, the person in charge of Phillips in Miami couldn't help but give Jiang Hai a warm hug. However, Jiang Hai just smiled and didn't say anything in response to this obvious compliment. Jiang Hai's face wasn't ugly, but it was still lacking when it came to handsomeness. Whether it was his previous handsomeness, thick eyebrows and big eyes, or his current handsomeness, the standard of feminine handsomeness, Jiang Hai couldn't even come close. Jiang Hai had a slightly long head with medium-length hair. It wasn't too long, but it wasn't too short either. It was very ordinary. Single eyelids. Because he used to wear glasses, his eyes were smaller. His nose wasn't very straight, but the tip of his nose was a little big. His mouth wasn't big, but it wasn't thin either. Of course, it had nothing to do with thickness. The only thing that met the standard of being handsome was his sharp chin. Jiang Hai was born with this. He was born with an oval face. Such a deputy face would not be a big deal in the crowd. If he was in Huaxia, it would be difficult to recognize him on the street without special attention. Such a face could be considered handsome, which only proved that this person was good at talking. There are a lot of people tonight. After giving the person in charge a friendly hug, Jiang Hai looked at the people around him and said with satisfaction. Many people meant that the things he wanted to sell were popular, and the popular things naturally proved that the things he wanted to sell this time could be sold at a high price. Of course, that thing of yours is a good treasure. Most of these people are here for that thing. It seems at this time you are really going to become a rich man. Looking at Jiang Hai, the person in charge smiled and gave him a punch as he spoke. Jiang Hai's expression changed. Same to you. It's not like you don't want to earn money. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also smiled and gave him a punch back. This is your admission ticket and token. If there's anything you like, you can raise it. I know that without that thing, you're also quite rich. Oh right, why didn't you bring your female companion? After the greetings, the person in charge had to receive other people, so he changed the topic and gave Jiang Hai a number plate with 108 printed on it. This is Jiang Hai's number plate. In a while, if Jiang Hai likes something, he can raise this plate and buy it. Don't I have to wear formal clothes? They don't want to wear it, so I have to do it myself. After receiving the plate, Jiang Hai explained to the person in charge and said with a smile, indeed, if it wasn't for the fact that this auction was his own item and he had never participated in an auction before, he wouldn't have come. Wearing a formal suit was too annoying. Do you need me to arrange a female companion for you? Seeing that Jiang Hai really didn't bring a female companion, the person in charge asked in a low voice, but Jiang Hai smiled and shook his head. In fact, when he just came in, there were many small models outside. He hoped that he could use these people to go in and get familiar with them. But unfortunately, these girls are actually ambitious. What they want is just to come in and spend a night with Jiang Hai. If he's staying by them, then Jiang Hai will be in trouble. This is what he can't bear. Forget it. I will go in by myself. After Jiang Hai finished, he patted the person in charge on the shoulder and walked in. After passing through the front hall, when Jiang Hai walked into the auction hall, he couldn't help but feel a little surprised because the hall here is really big, although it is not the annual spring auction of the auction house. However, it was obvious that Phillips didn't use an ordinary auction venue to deal with Jiang Hai. In this hall, which was about 5,000 square meters, there were 2 long tables on both sides with many snacks on them. Of course, there were all cold meals such as sausages, cakes, fruits, and so on, so that people wouldn't be too bored. The chairs used during the auction were also very particular. It wasn't like in the movies, where many people sat on small chairs and raised their placards. Instead, Every group of guests will have a small round table. The main seat is facing the auction stage, and there is a fixed iPad on the table for guests who are a little far away to see the situation. They can also use their hands to rotate the item three-dimensional, see all the details, and check the information of this thing. Of course, what can be confirmed is that the things here must be real, otherwise their reputation will be ruined. Jiang Hai glanced at the scene here. He has to admit that the layout here is really quite good. It gives people a very modern feeling. At least, Jiang Hai is still quite interested in this place. Jiang Hai's number is 108, which is number 8. In order to show that there are more people on his side, the numbers start from 101. In this hall, there are 6 tables in a row. Jiang Hai's number 8 is just in the middle of the second row. Not to mention that Jiang Hai is the owner of the last auction item. Jiang Hai himself is worth 1 billion yuan. There is no problem for him to sit here. Jiang Hai sat here and looked back and forth. He found that most of the people here actually know each other. They are chatting with each other or bragging. Jiang Hai does not know any of the people here, so he looked at his watch and found that there is still more than half an hour. Jiang Hai got up first and went to get some food back. He will be here, playing mobile games while eating, waiting for the auction to start. But the food he took is really too little, and it was finished in a short time. Just as Jiang Hai was about to get up again to get some food, a voice interrupted his action. "Hello, we meet again." Hearing this slightly strange English, Jiang Hai couldn't help but look up and find that he really knows the visitor. It is the Middle Eastern nouveau riche who wanted to buy the yacht he liked when he bought the yacht. "Hello, I didn't expect to see you here again." Seeing the other party's kind smile, Jiang Hai immediately stood up, shook hands with him, and said politely, "Jiang Hai is like this. If others respect him, then he will be very kind to others. I'd already left and went to Panama, but I heard that there are good things here, so I came back. How is it? Is the boat still good?" After shaking hands with Jiang Hai, the Middle Eastern nouveau riche opposite him asked politely, "If you don't mind, let's sit down and talk. That boat is not bad." Motioning the other party to sit down and talk, Jiang Hai also said with a smile. At the same time, Jiang Hai also glanced at the other party's position and found that the other party should be diagonally to his side, position 103. Because at this time, except for the main seat, all the other seats are full. Except for a bodyguard, the rest are women in black veils. In the whole room, only this table is dressed like this. If he doesn't sit there, where else can he sit? As expected of the Middle Eastern nouveau riche, the position there is actually the best. Of course, my Eastern friend. Let me introduce myself first. My name is Du Feynman, Weha Muhammad bin Rashid Ayun Ukdum. I know, for you, this name is a bit too long, but my friends call me Du Feynman. You can call me that too. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the nouveau riche didn't care about this and sat directly opposite Jiang Hai and said with a smile, "Hello, Du Feynman. My name is Jiang Hai, from Huaxia. You can call me Jiang." Listening to the other party's tongue-twisting name, Jiang Hai quickly followed the advice. He didn't want to be called by his full name. In fact, he didn't remember it until now. "All right, Jiang. It's fate that brought us together. I think we'll meet again." After the two introduced themselves, the door in the distance gradually closed. Du Feynman, who was not attending the auction for the first time, knew that it meant that the auction was about to start. Since the auction was about to start, it was not good for him to sit on Jiang Hai's side all the time. Instead, he smiled at Jiang Hai and returned to his seat. Not long after he sat down, Jiang Hai saw another door in the distant room. An old man walked out with a group of security guards. For an auction like this, first, video recording was not allowed, and second, no trouble was allowed. It was natural for some security guards to be here. For the arrival of these people, the rich businessmen present didn't care. Instead, they all continued to sit there and look at the old man on the stage. This old man was actually not an ordinary person. He was the best auctioneer in Philips, and this time, he specially rushed over from Europe. Dear ladies and gentlemen, we are fated to meet today to verify the ownership of these treasures. I'm honored to be this time's auctioneer. After the old man got on the stage, he bowed to the people in front of him and then began to speak. In fact, the opening speech was similar to what Jiang Hai thought. It was nothing more than setting the tone for the following auction. According to the old man, there were only a total of 31 items in this auction. It was understandable. These items should have been originally prepared for the autumn auction or the next spring auction. However, because of Jiang Hai's item, they were released in advance. After listening to the old man's words, Jiang Hai knew that he could check the detailed information of all the auction items today in the iPad in front of him. If he didn't say, Jiang Hai wouldn't have known. While the old man was happily speaking, Jiang Hai also checked according to what he said. Sure enough, he found the catalog of this auction in an app. There were a total of 31 items in this auction, and Jiang Hai's armor was the last item. It was also the finale item of this auction. The 30 items before were basically everything. Some European oil paintings, gems, and even modern art. However, the item that Jiang Hai was most familiar with was a pair of blue and white porcelain vases. Needless to say, this should be the one he sold. Among these 31 items, this vase's ranking wasn't high, but it wasn't low either. It was ranked 16th. It seemed that this thing wasn't as valuable as he thought. The blue and white porcelain vases from the Wanli era weren't that valuable. Well, let's not talk too much. Next, let's welcome our first auction item today, number 786-6547. Chapter 315. As the old man's voice fell, the two women carefully walked over with a painting in their hands. This was the item number 786-6547. It was an oil painting. According to the description, this oil painting wasn't very old. It was probably around 100 years old. However, the person who painted this oil painting was very famous. Henri Matisse, a famous French painter, the founder and main representative of the Fauvism oil painting. He was also a sculptor, a printmaker, and a master who lived until modern times. He didn't pass away until 1954, so the value of his oil paintings wasn't very high at first, but they had become very popular in recent years. Someone once said that he and Picasso were the two greatest painters of the 20th century, and could be compared to Picasso. This showed the value of his paintings. It was a good choice to use his painting as the opening. Looking at this painting, which he didn't know what the hell it was, Jiang Hai couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. However, the guests at the other tables were very interested, and many of them began to study it. The starting price of this painting is $800,000, and each bid must be no less than $50,000. Please bid. At this moment, the old man on the stage had finished introducing the painting and began to speak. As his voice fell, someone in the distance had already raised a sign. 800,000. Someone had already bid, but this price didn't stay for even a second before it was pushed down by others. 80, 85, 90, 95, 100. Although no one directly called a high price, each raised sign represented $50,000. Unknowingly, about a minute later, the price of this painting had been raised to $6 million. At this time, the bidding slowed down, and the main competitors became the 4 or 5 families. These companies are all very powerful. They are also the main potential buyers of your armor. Just as Jiang Hai was watching the scene, the person in charge of Phillips walked to Jiang Hai's table with a smile and sat down beside Jiang Hai. Oh, what do you mean? Jiang Hai was bored here, so he didn't mind letting the person in charge explain to him. After all, it was his first time attending such an auction, so it was inevitable that he wasn't confident. The main potential buyers of your armor this time are 4 groups of people. The first group is the Arabian at table 103. Pointing at the table in front of Jiang Hai, the person in charge whispered, "Du Feynman." Jiang Hai still remembered this person and couldn't help but ask in a low voice, "Oh, you know him?" Hearing that Jiang Hai actually knew his name, the person in charge couldn't help but look at him with some surprise. "I don't really know him. I met him once when I bought a yacht. We just introduced ourselves." Jiang Hai shook his head. Obviously, they had met twice, so they didn't really know each other. Jiang Hai was the kind of person who would do that. "Oh, then let me introduce him to you. This is Du Feynman Vier Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum." He is not an ordinary person. His father was originally the third prince of Dubai. He is the brother of the current king, but he did not inherit the throne later. Instead, he was given a large number of oil fields. This is his only legal heir. The current defense minister of Dubai is his uncle, and the tourism minister is his uncle. He mainly manages food issues. He is a real local tyrant. Listening to the person in charge's introduction, Jiang Hai couldn't help but be a little surprised. He didn't expect this young man to be a local tyrant. There are also three forces. One is the Spaniards. Your armor is the armor of Philip III of Spain. Fortunately, I don't know where you got this armor from. If you got it from some shipwreck, they would have already jumped. The Spaniards' international reputation has always been bad, especially in the area of shipwrecks. Although Spain is located in the European Union, in fact, the living standards of their people are really not much different from those in China. The only good thing is that they have good welfare. Other things, whether it's income, medical care, public facilities, etc., are not much worse than those in first-tier cities in China. Of course, compared with some second-tier, third-tier, and even rural areas, they still have a big advantage. After all, the country is not that big. There's another group of people. Those are the businessmen from Soviet Russia, the real giants. In this world, except for the Huaxia people, they're the only ones who can compete with the Middle Eastern local tyrants. After introducing the Spaniards, the person in charge pointed to another table, where there was a table of Caucasians with slick back hair and big noses. Jiang Hai's home is in Bing City. There are many Soviet Russian women in Bing City. Of course, there are also some men. Jiang Hai is no stranger to the Soviet Russians. The last wave of people who can afford to buy it is the British over there. The British have a grudge against the Spanish. Everyone knows this, so for this set of armor, they won't let the Spanish take it back easily. Finally, the person in charge introduced a table in the farthest corner. That table is the British. Looking at the four groups of people, Jiang Hai shrugged. He is not interested in these people. As long as he can make more money, who these people are and what they do has nothing to do with him. When the person in charge was introducing these businessmen, the first oil painting was successfully auctioned off. In the end, the oil painting was sold for $7 million. It is not particularly high, but it is definitely not low either. The people who bought this oil painting were the Soviet Russians mentioned by the person in charge. They are the Far East tycoons. After the first oil painting was auctioned off, the second oil painting attracted Jiang Hai's disdain. If the first oil painting is a Fauvism painting, at least he can tell what it is. But the second oil painting is inexplicable. It was as if there was a child who was holding paint and applying it to the cloth. But as it happened, this painting was even more popular than the first one. The final price was $1 million. Fine. This world is crazy. Jiang Hai really cannot understand. Is this the legendary art? At the very least, when these people bought a painting, they had to know what the painting was about. What was the painting about? Is it a ghost? After complaining, Jiang Hai is too lazy to care about it. The auction is still ongoing. The third item was a set of furniture from the Middle Ages. It was quite useful. In the end, it was auctioned for $2 million. It was hard to understand that this set of mahogany furniture was not as valuable as the ghostly painting. It made people speechless. The fourth item was a clay pot, and the fifth was a weapon that was said to have been used by Napoleon. But Napoleon had many weapons in his possession. This item wasn't very valuable, but it was eventually sold for the highest price to date, $6 million. It was bought by a Russian tycoon. If there was one thing that a Russian tycoon could boast about, one is during World War II, when they single-handedly stopped Germany's blitzkrieg attack. Germany had no choice but to invade Africa because the Soviet Union could not defeat them. The other achievement is when Napoleon swept across Europe. Napoleon almost unified all of Europe, but in the end, he was defeated by the Soviet Union. Therefore, Napoleon's collection is still very valuable in the Soviet Union. The auction continued, and soon, it was time for Jiang Hai's first collection, which was the pair of blue and white porcelain vases. In the end, the vases were sold for $65 million. The auction house still made a profit. After all, in Miami, they only had to pay 35% of the state tax, which was $577,500. Other than that, the auction house made a profit. Of course, a big auction house like theirs can reduce the tax. It is estimated that they only need to pay $500,000. In addition to the $1 million that they paid to Jianghai, they also made more than $100,000, which is a small profit. After the pair of blue and white porcelain vases, Jianghai is a little distracted because he is not very interested in the following items. Maybe there are many cultural differences between the East and the West. At least, Jianghai does not think that these things are worth his attention. Jianghai only took a cursory glance at the next 15 items, but he didn't see anything that caught his eye. More than an hour later, it is time for the last item, which is the finale of the evening, Jianghai's golden armor of Philip III. As the auctioneer finished speaking, two strong men carrying a huge box walked over. As the box was opened, the armor inside appeared in front of everyone. There is no need for the auctioneer to say anything. As soon as the armor lit up, almost everyone sighed in admiration. Looking at the armor in front of him, the auctioneer slowly walked over. I don't need to say much. I think everyone is basically here for this armor. Although Philip III's reputation in European history wasn't particularly good, he was still the man who once ruled the entire Atlantic Ocean. I don't need to say much about the collectible value of his armor. I think all the experts present here are very clear. The starting bid for this armor is $100 million, but each increment is $1 million, $130 million. However, before his voice fell, he was already interrupted by a voice from below. Following everyone's gaze, he found that the person who made the bid was from the Spanish table. It was obvious that they were very anxious. $150 million. But unfortunately, not everyone will give them face. At least according to the person in charge, the other three families who have the ability to compete tonight will not easily let go of this collection. So the British side bid first. $200 million. But before everyone could recover, the Russian tycoon raised his hand. Wow! Although it is far from the price Jianghai and the others estimated, the fierce competition from the beginning still surprised everyone. Jianghai's mouth unconsciously opened. Go ahead, the higher the price, the happier he will be. Chapter 316. $250 million. Just as the Soviet Union's giant head finished shouting, before the audience could focus on them, the Spanish player had already shouted. The 50 million tier was indeed very surprising. Hearing the price, the British guy hesitated for a moment. In fact, before they came here, they had already investigated the value of this armor. In addition to the special feelings of the Spanish government, other countries basically wanted to collect and humiliate this country. But there is also a limit to the humiliation, such as $500 million. Now that the price has been raised to $250 million, to be honest, the arrogant British guy was a little scared. $280 million. But just because they are scared, it doesn't mean that others are scared too. At this time, the Middle Eastern guy at table 103 finally made his move. He raised the sign in his hand, and his assistant quoted new price. $300 million. Hearing the Middle Eastern guy's bid, the Spanish guy immediately followed. Looking at the Spanish guy, gritting his teeth, the Russian guy who didn't care at all laughed. Making these Europeans unhappy is indeed something they're happy to see. So the Russian guy slowly raised his hand. $400 million. As the big guy's slightly curly voice fell, the British guy withdrew from the bidding for the first time. For them, they just want to annoy the Spanish. After all, this armor isn't an item from the United Kingdom. Bastard. The Spanish guy at the table in the distance couldn't help but curse in a low voice. He raised the sign in his hand again. This time, they didn't call out a bid, which means that they only added the most basic $1 million. In fact, in their view, the price of $400 million is almost the price they want. After all, Spain's annual GDP is only ranked 6th in Europe and only 13th in the world. The Spanish government won't give them too much money to buy an item like this. And to be honest, they can't bear to pay for it themselves. However, even if they couldn't hold on, it didn't mean that others couldn't. Just as the bid of 401 million was made, the Middle Eastern tycoon raised his hand again. His assistant directly reported a round number. 500 million. As his voice fell, the audience's reaction became even more enthusiastic. Although they had done some research on this set of armor before coming here and knew that the price should be around 1 billion, when the price was actually announced, they really panicked a little. 600 million. Hearing the bid from the Middle East tycoons, the Russian tycoons weren't joking. They added up 100 million. At this time, the Spanish tycoons' faces were ugly. Actually, they were about the same as the British. But compared to the British's 500 million, they had prepared 100 million. The Spanish tycoons' upper limit was 600 million. But now, the Russians had already bid 600 million. Although this was an international symbol, just like the imperial jade seal in China, this price was really unacceptable. As for Jiang Hai, he felt that his breathing had become lighter. Although Phillips had said that this armor could be sold for 1 billion, Jiang Hai still couldn't accept this price. But when the money really appeared in front of Jiang Hai, he was a little dumbfounded. He glanced at the person in charge next to him. Although the person in charge was still very calm, his trembling hands betrayed him. Go and contact the British. Looking at the bidding between the Middle Eastern tycoons and the Far Eastern tycoons, the Spanish decided to compromise. This thing belonged to Europe. Since they couldn't get it, they had to keep it in Europe. They couldn't let the Middle Eastern people buy it. Who knew what they would do with this armor? Put on a lion? It wasn't like they hadn't done it before. So, the Spanish table quietly went to the British table. After the two sides talked for a while, the Spanish were obviously relieved. At this time, the Middle Eastern tycoon raised the price again, and the price had reached $800 million. 900 million. Looking at the Middle Eastern tycoons who didn't care about money, the Russian tycoons couldn't help but wipe their sweat. Finally, a fat Russian man shouted loudly, but after he finished speaking, he felt as if he had used up all his strength and sat directly on the chair. This was the limit of the Russian side. At this time, the auctioneer also glanced at the person in charge below. This price was actually about right. When the person in charge nodded, indicating that they could count for a few seconds, suddenly another voice was heard. 1 billion. I'll pay $1 billion. As the voice sounded, everyone looked at the Spanish side. They didn't know how they persuaded the British to give them the money, but now they were bidding $1 billion. This thing was really too precious for Europe and for the Spanish. This was the armor of an emperor during their most powerful period. It was as if Li Shimon's armor was suddenly unearthed in modern times. No, not to mention Li Shimon. Even if it was Li Ji or Li Longji's armor, it was absolutely priceless. If the government didn't make it clear, the private businessmen would buy it back, even if it cost tens of billions. Although Philip III wasn't that amazing, for the Spanish people, their emperor's armor being placed in a museum of another country was a great humiliation for the whole country. No matter how much it cost, they had to buy it. As soon as the price of 1 billion was announced, the whole venue quieted down. Jiang Hai, who was originally very tense, couldn't help but relax. He had reached his final goal, 1 billion. God, this time he really had more than $1 billion. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai was full of joy from the inside out. This was more exciting than doing it. 1 billion first. As for the auctioneer over there, he didn't shout anything this time. Because this price was high enough, he was ready to shout 3 times before dropping the hammer. Looking at the auctioneer's appearance, the Spaniards couldn't help but raise their heads arrogantly. This price was already their limit, but money, there will always be a time when they can earn it back. If this thing is really gone, then it will be a national shame. Just as the auctioneer was about to drop the hammer and the Spanish people were about to cheer, a big hand was raised again. 1 billion. As the voice fell, everyone looked at the owner of the hand. Needless to say, the owner of this hand was the Middle Eastern tycoon, Du Femenvier Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum. Looking at the faint smile on his face, not only the Spanish people, but even the British people felt their faces heat up. This was not a time of war, but an era of peace. What was the most important thing in this world? Money. 100 years ago, Europe dominated the world. But now, the world belonged to the Koreans and the Japanese. As long as they liked something, although history wasn't theirs, they could buy it, no matter what it was. 1 billion going once, 1 billion going twice, 1 billion sold. As the auctioneer quickly said these three sentences and dropped the hammer, the Spanish people helplessly sat back in their chairs. Their national treasure had disappeared just like that. As for Jiang Hai, he also slumped in his chair. There was only a smile on his face. He had made a lot of money this time. After the auction, there was a banquet. Originally, Jiang Hai didn't want to join in the fun, but he felt that he had made 1 billion. Even if he deducted the tax and commission, he would still have 682 million left. Now that he had put it in his bank account, it had slightly exceeded the 1 billion mark. As long as the three buyers bought the cows, Jiang Hai's wealth would exceed $2 billion. Thinking about it, he felt that he didn't need to do anything for the rest of his life. No, his next life, the next life, the next life, and the next life after that. It was enough for him to indulge in wine and women. Sometimes, people just needed to have dreams to fight for. In the past, Jiang Hai's dream was to be rich. Now that he was very rich, his dream became to eat and wait for death. Well, he was a child of a plain with no ambition. The banquet was very lively, but the Spanish people weren't there because they had to report what happened today. Apart from them, everyone else was in a good mood. After all, the last piece of armor was their life and fortune, so it didn't matter if they lost it, especially the Russian tycoons, because they had already bought a lot of goods before this. Ever since the banquet started, Jiang Hai's main goal was to eat. Although he came to this banquet, he still felt out of place in such a scene. He had always thought of himself as a loser. Even though he was very rich now, he was still a loser. He was a loser, but he didn't feel inferior. Instead, he was quite proud. At least he wasn't as hypocritical as those successful people. Of course, this was what he thought. "Hi, Jiang, we meet again." Just as Jiang Hai was eating happily and was about to be full, a familiar voice came from afar. Jiang Hai looked up and saw that it was none other than Du Feynman, who had bought his armor and his women. "We meet again, Du Feynman. Congratulations." Seeing that it was his rich man, Jiang Hai stood up with a smile. "Congratulations to you, too. This is not a small fortune." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Du Feynman also smiled. How did you know it was me?" Hearing his words, the smile on Jiang Hai's face couldn't help but freeze. The hand that was about to reach out couldn't help but retract. Was this person investigating him? If this was really the case, then he had to be careful. Chapter 317. Don't be nervous, my friend. We won't harm our friends because we have faith. Hee. As for how I know that you are the original owner of this armor, first of all, you were too obvious at the auction house. Second, my family also has shares in Philips. Although I can't clearly know the name of the owner of the armor, I can still know the news of a Huaxia. Today, you're the only Huaxia present. Seeing that Jiang Hai was a little nervous, Du Feynman shrugged indifferently and said to Jiang Hai with a smile. Although Jiang Hai knew that Du Feynman was telling the truth, Jiang Hai still had to be careful. This guy was not as polite as he looked on the surface. In that case, he should have already known that Jiang Hai was the owner of the armor before the auction started. The reason why he came over to get acquainted with Jiang Hai was probably to get close to him. As for the person in charge, it was very likely that this guy had hired him. It seemed that Jiang Hai was still too young. "I just want to deal with the handover of the armor. Your armor has already boarded the plane and is flying to my residence in Dubai. As for your money, Philips is currently transferring it to you. Not a single cent less." As if he saw Jiang Hai's grudge, Du Feynman said with a smile. He had already known about this. "I don't care about the armor. I only care about the money." Seeing Du Feynman sitting directly in front of him, Jiang Hai also slowly sat down. While eating the German roast pork in front of him, he also said with a smile, "That's right, my friend. Don't have any psychological burden. What I gave you is real money." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Du Feynman couldn't help but laugh. What he said was very true. "In that case, my friend, now that the transaction is over, what are you looking for me for?" Putting down the knife and fork in his hand, Jiang Hai looked at Du Feimin and asked curiously, "It's like this, Jiang. I think you also know that our Dubai has recently been undergoing a tourism renovation. I wonder if you are interested in joining us. As my friend, I'll give you the green light all the way." Seeing Jiang Hai's serious appearance, Du Feimin also smiled. Jiang Hai took 1 billion from him, so he naturally wanted to fight for it. This wasn't just 11 pieces. "Oh, Du Feimin, you're not treating me as a friend. Is Dubai's real estate business really that good now?" Looking at Du Feimin, Jiang Hai shook his head and directly rejected his proposal. What a joke, who didn't know? Ever since Dubai's oil wells were about to dry up, the Dubai government decided to turn Dubai into a tourist city. From then on, they built a large number of entertainment facilities and offered cheap land prices to attract foreign real estate developers. But these things were all bubbles. Jiang Hai remembered that a few years ago, Dubai almost went bankrupt because of tourism. At its peak, Dubai owed the outside world more than $30 billion. Fortunately, the Arabian royal families were basically in cahoots with each other. Other countries in the world poured a lot of money into Dubai, which was how Dubai came back from the dead. But even so, there were a lot of unfinished buildings in Dubai. Many people were willing to travel here, but no one was willing to live here. At least, almost no rich people in Huaxia would move there. The cost of living was too high, and it was located in the middle of the desert. Plus, the security wasn't very good. After all, the world of ordinary people was very poor. So many people were willing to travel, but they weren't willing to live there. Jiang Hai would be crazy to develop there. "Oh, it seems that my friend is very smart." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Du Feimin didn't care. He knew that as long as this person wasn't stupid, he wouldn't agree to come to Dubai to do real estate business. "You're not interested in real estate. Then, are you interested in this?" After Du Feimin finished speaking, he took out a piece of hard paper from the sleeve of his robe and handed it to Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai took it and looked at it. His eyes lit up. If he wasn't interested in real estate, he was very interested in this thing. "Can you tell me why you're selling this to me?" Jiang Hai asked curiously as he tapped on the hard paper in front of him. He really didn't understand. One had to know that there were people dying every day in the world for this thing. Although this thing wasn't much, it was the lifeline of the world. Jiang Hai didn't believe that a pie would fall from the sky. "Of course, I believe that you won't easily sell this thing to others. This is also a kind of investment. I'll leave it with you first. When the time comes, I'll redeem it. Of course, if you want to sell it, it's up to you. After all, this thing is yours," Du Feimin said seriously as he looked at Jiang Hai. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai gently tapped on the hard paper in front of him. Now, he was considering whether this business was good or not. After hesitating for about 5 minutes, Jiang Hai smiled. He felt that he was thinking too much. No matter what Du Feimin wanted the money for, he did get what he wanted. Most importantly, this thing would never depreciate. Even when he got these things, the value of these things was already rising. Jiang Hai didn't know that Du Feimin's things should be able to sell at a higher price. Why did he let him take advantage of this? But looking at his smile and his eyes looking at the Soviet Russians in the distance from time to time, Jiang Hai understood that by selling his resources to the enemy, he could indeed obtain higher profits in a short time. But in the future, this would be the trump card in the hands of his enemy. And Jiang Hai, an outsider, would be a good place to deal with it. Deal. Thinking about the value of this thing, Jiang Hai didn't need to refuse. He directly extended his hand and said to Du Feimin. Du Feimin also extended his hand with a smile. In fact, his thoughts were similar to Jiang Hai's. In this business, Jiang Hai would make money, and he would make time. After talking to Jiang Hai, Du Feimin left. Jiang Hai also left after eating, but he wasn't in a hurry to return to the hotel. Instead, he went to Philip's auction house, where the person in charge had been waiting for him for a long time. As Jiang Hai's phone rang, $282 million were deposited into his bank account. The $400 million that disappeared were exchanged for the stack of paper in his hand. But Jiang Hai was very optimistic about this stack of paper. Taking these papers, Jiang Hai returned to the hotel. Although he looked calm on the way, he was actually on guard the whole time. What if Du Feynman set up a trap for him and turned around to attack? He was on guard against all the passers-by. What if they tried to rob him? He was on guard against the whole world. In Jiang Hai's eyes, there wasn't a single place in the world that was safe. What he needed to do was return to the hotel as soon as possible. Only then could he feel a little more at ease. Jiang Hai drove all the way to the entrance of the hotel very quickly. Naturally, he asked the doorman to park the car. Jiang Hai quickly walked into the hotel. A big, romantic man was lying on the lawn at the entrance of the hotel. Jiang Hai's heart couldn't help but beat a little faster. It wasn't that Jiang Hai was timid, but that this stack of paper was really too important. "Jiang, you're back." When Jiang Hai returned to his room, his clothes were unknowingly soaked. When they saw him come back, Aphrodite and the other girls, who had been watching TV, couldn't help but stand up to welcome Jiang Hai. But even when they stood up, they gave Jiang Hai a fright. Seeing Jiang Hai's actions, the girls couldn't help but stare blankly. "Phew, it's fine. It's not aimed at you guys. Wait for me here first. We'll leave tomorrow and return to Boston." Looking at the girls, Jiang Hai smiled and comforted them. He hesitated for a moment, but he still trusted the girls. He walked up to them and rubbed their heads one by one before returning to his room. As soon as he entered his room, Jiang Hai took out the file he had been holding in his clothes. Opening the file and looking at the stack of papers inside, the corners of Jiang Hai's mouth couldn't help but open. From the looks of it, the stack of papers in Jiang Hai's arms was only worth $400 million. $400 million wasn't a small amount, but it wasn't worth it for Jiang Hai to be so nervous. After all, he had nearly $600 million in his bank account. It wasn't that he didn't care about the $400 million, but that the $400 million was actually a protective talisman and choice for Jiang Hai. This stack of papers wasn't just worth $400 million. In fact, it was a pass to a higher level. Even if he didn't want to use it to go to a higher level, he could use it in exchange for more benefits and more money. Even when he encountered a crisis that he couldn't solve himself, such as when his opponent was the American government or some large tycoon, this thing would play a crucial role. For $100 million? That was just the starting price. Even if Jiang Hai sold it now, no one would be able to touch it without $500 million. And most importantly, as time went by, the money would increase, and there was no possibility of it going to waste. What could make Jiang Hai so confident? Even if it was the fruit company or Coca-Cola, they wouldn't dare say that their stock prices wouldn't drop at all. But Jiang Hai was confident that this stack of papers would make a profit of $1 million. There was no way the price would drop. Changfu was even much bigger than the fruit company and Coca-Cola. It had zero risk and high returns, because this thing was called oil futures. Chapter 3:18. Jiang Hai didn't know how he fell asleep that night. When he woke up the next day, he was already preparing to return to Boston. With a stack of papers on him, he really wasn't in the mood to let him play here. After getting out of bed, Jiang Hai told Aphrodite and the other girls that they were going to clean up. Originally, Jiang Hai was reluctant to leave his yacht, which cost him more than $5 million here, so he planned to drive the yacht along the east coast of the United States all the way back to Boston. He estimated that it would take about a week even if he didn't get off the yacht. But at this time, Jiang Hai was not at ease. The yacht was only worth $5 million. If he handed it over to the towing company, it would arrive in about 10 days. But the stack of paper in his arms was worth $400 million. No, it was worth at least $400 million. He didn't want to lose a watermelon for sesame seeds. This was not what he should do. So early this morning, Jiang Hai decided to fly back directly. The girls had heard Jiang Hai's words last night, so they were almost done packing at night. This morning, they checked their belongings for the last time, took their phones, chargers, and so on, and could leave. Jiang Hai and the others had gained a lot from this trip to Miami. Everyone had gained something. Let's talk about the 10 girls first. After this trip to Miami, the 10 girls could finally speak openly after returning. At the same time, because of the life-and-death situation, the bond between them and Jiang Hai had become tighter and tighter. They liked Jiang Hai more and more. From worship and gratitude at the beginning, they had gradually turned into dependence. From dislike, they had gradually moved toward love. Of course, Jiang Hai didn't know this. He understood that the gains of these girls, in addition to being able to speak openly, the most important thing was that they bought a lot of new clothes back home. Although the aunties in Jiang Hai's manor had already begun to accept these girls, they still didn't dare to do so. However, with these women's taste, it was really difficult to buy good-looking clothes. Miami was a model's paradise. Here, you could buy anything you wanted. Jiang Hai gave them pocket money, plus the salary they had saved over the past few months, so they could spend a lot of money here. Although they couldn't afford luxury brands, they bought a lot of small things. When they came, each of the girls had a small backpack, but when they went back, they all brought a suitcase. In addition to the girls, Moses Adams also gained a lot. The most obvious thing was that his income had increased a lot. Maybe it was for hush money, or maybe it was for favors. Since they came to Miami, Jiang Hai had given Moses Adams a total of nearly $2 million. If Moses Adams earned this money step by step, it would take him a few years to earn it back. So in response to Jiang Hai's generosity, Moses Adams also offered his friendship and loyalty. As for the one who gained the most, Jiang Hai thought it was himself. This time in Miami, Jiang Hai's net worth doubled, and he also got a priceless stepping stone to the upper class, 400 million yuan of oil futures. Even if Jiang Hai did not have any ambition for the upper class, this was also a talisman. No matter who he offended, as long as he was not considered a traitor by the American government, this thing in his hand could protect him. It should be known that in the United States, it was not the American government that had the power, but the major consortia. Among all the consortia, the most famous one was naturally Rockefeller. Although the reputation of this consortium was very bad, there was no need to doubt the ability of this oil consortium. So in Jiang Hai's view, he really made a lot of money this time. After packing up, Jiang Hai went downstairs first, mainly because he had to check out and discuss the car. Because Moses Adams was going back to Boston with him today, the car rental company had been informed to come and pick up the car they rented. Because of this, they needed to take the hotel car to the airport, which the hotel had no problem with. Jiang Hai and the others lived in a presidential suite and a suite. It was the hotel's responsibility to take them to the airport. So they immediately contacted a luxury minibus to pick up Jiang Hai and the others to the airport. Jiang Hai and the others were not particularly pretentious. After everything was done, Jiang Hai sat by the window of the hall, waiting for Aphrodite and the others to come down, while waiting for the minibus. At the same time, he looked at Miami outside. Although he had been here for a long time, Jiang Hai really liked this city. Of course, it would be better if there were no gray areas. Miami was a very slow and leisure city. Compared with the fast pace of Boston and New York, Jiang Hai preferred this slow feeling. It was indeed a famous tourist city in the United States. At the same time, Jiang Hai also thought, when I chose the ranch, why didn't I choose here? Maybe the ranch here is not good, but the fishing ground here is very good. You know, this is a tropical place. It is as warm as spring all year round, unlike Winthrop. Although it is not as cold as Ice City in winter, it can still freeze people to death. At least the weather made Jiang Hai like this place, but it was too late to say anything now. For now, Jiang Hai has taken root in Winthrop, and he has no plans to go elsewhere for the time being. Just as Jiang Hai was feeling emotional, he suddenly saw a man lying on the lawn of the hotel at this time, a white man. When Jiang Hai came back last night, he saw him lying there. It seems that he has been lying here all night. When he saw him last night, maybe because it was too dark and Jiang Hai had a lot of treasures, he didn't dare to look at him carefully. Now that it was daytime, Jiang Hai couldn't help but be surprised when he saw this person, because this person looks a bit familiar. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai couldn't help but walk out of the hotel and come to the lawn outside. When Jiang Hai walked over, the big man seemed to have heard Jiang Hai's footsteps. He opened his eyes and sat up, but as soon as he sat up, he covered his ribs and looked at Jiang Hai vigilantly. After seeing that Jiang Hai didn't seem to be a threat to him, he lay down again, but his eyes didn't close again. "It's you, you're that boxer?" Looking at the white man lying down again, Jiang Hai tried to recall who this person was in his mind. It was one of the two boxers that he had hired when he went to the bar. The Muay Thai master was nowhere to be found. This big man was the wrestling master. Jiang Hai had no idea where he was. However, what made Jiang Hai a little surprised was that the income of underground fighting should be very high. Why would he appear here? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the big man just glanced at him and didn't speak, still lying there. Why are you here? It seems that your injuries haven't been cured. Didn't you win? Seeing this person's appearance, Jiang Hai sat beside him with some curiosity. He didn't see clearly just now, but now that he was closer, he noticed the situation of this person's body. The injuries on this person's body had only been treated simply. His face was still blue and purple, and the wound on his head seemed to be rotting and had begun to fester. His ribs were also blue and purple. Needless to say, his broken ribs were not fixed properly. This made Jiang Hai feel a little strange. He had heard that people who fought in underground boxing would get a lot of money if they won. What was this situation? Conrad, I'm hungry. Seeing that Jiang Hai not only didn't leave, but also sat beside him, the white man spoke for the first time. But as soon as he spoke, Jiang Hai frowned. Although this man's eyes were clear, Jiang Hai could tell from his somewhat slurred speech that this person seemed to be sick. Conrad should be his name, and he was hungry. Well, from this sentence, the problem could be seen. Then I'll treat you to a meal. What do you want to eat? Steak or a buffet? Looking at the big man in front of him, Jiang Hai also had some thoughts of hiding. It was fate that they met. The most important thing was that Jiang Hai was in a good mood now, so he was prepared to help him. Hamburger, pizza. But unfortunately, in the face of the temptation of steak, the big man shook his head. He didn't like to eat this thing. Instead, he pointed across the street and continued to speak to Jiang Hai in a staccato voice. Let's go. I'll treat you to a meal. Eating a hamburger, Jiang Hai didn't care about treating him. He waved at him directly, indicating that he should go with him. The big man glanced at Jiang Hai and didn't have too much vigilance. Instead, he stood up while clutching his ribs and followed Jiang Hai to the hamburger shop across the street. Originally, Jiang Hai didn't know much about this guy. Now that he stood up and walked forward, even Jiang Hai couldn't help but exclaim because this guy was taller than he imagined. Jiang Hai was originally 186 meters tall, which wasn't particularly short in Huaxia. But after coming to the United States, this height was basically slightly taller than the average height. But since the tattoo, Jiang Hai's body had undergone a second growth. In fact, now Jiang Hai's height had exceeded 9 meters and reached about 92 meters. Although he didn't measure in detail, he was now considered a tall man. However, standing next to this guy, Jiang Hai found that his head only reached his shoulders. And this was because he was injured, so he needed to cover his wound. Otherwise, he would be even taller. This guy was definitely more than 1 meters tall. When Jiang Hai was looking at this person had already walked quickly across the street and directly walked into a Burger King. In the United States, Western fast food, such as hamburgers, were everywhere. Not only are there many small shops opened by people, there are also many small shops. Kaifeng, which dominated the domestic market, was really not a big brand in the United States. It was understandable. The price of chicken and beef was about the same. What was there to compare? Chapter 319. Therefore, in foreign countries, especially the United States and Western fast food, except for those who want to lose weight and can't control their appetite, very few people will go to eat kaifeng. McDonald's status in the United States is like Coca-Cola. It is untouchable. However, in addition to McDonald's, there are many other fast food restaurants that are also very good, such as Big John's, which is a chain store that sells pizza. This is much more famous than Pizza Hut, and Subway, which specializes in selling sandwiches. The taste is very good. There is also Domino's, which also sells pizza, and Burger King, which Conrad entered, is naturally one of the brands. Jiang Hai has eaten Burger King's hamburgers before. To be honest, in terms of hamburgers, Burger King's hamburgers are 2 streets ahead of McDonald's, not to mention kaifeng. Let's not talk about the taste of the hamburgers. Just the ingredients in the hamburgers can never be surpassed by kaifeng. Jiang Hai only likes to eat 2 kinds of hamburgers, One is the Imperial Burger, which is more than 2 circles bigger than an ordinary hamburger, with 2 layers, 3 layers for layers, the thick layers of meat stacked together, with pickled cucumber, lettuce, and sauce on top. The taste is really unparalleled. And it is quite filling for a big eater like Jiang Hai. He is full after eating too. In addition to the Imperial Burger, Jiang Hai's favorite is the Italian full meat burger, which has 3 or 4 layers, 1 layer of meat, 1 layer of cheese, 1 layer of meat, 1 layer of cheese, and 1 layer of bacon on top. It is quite delicious to eat. In addition to cheese and meat in the mouth, although the price is slightly more expensive than Kaifeng, it is really good food. It seems that Conrad is also quite knowledgeable. He went straight to this burger shop. However, as soon as he entered, 2 waiters walked towards him. Get out, you are not welcome here." Looking at Conrad, the 2 waiters couldn't help but say coldly. Hearing their words, Conrad's footsteps stopped at this time, which made Jiang Hai, who has been following him, also stop and look at Conrad's face. Because he knows that Conrad is not an ordinary person, he is very strong. He is really afraid that these 2 guys will make him angry. If he goes berserk, then it will be troublesome. However, the berserk that Jiang Hai imagined did not happen. After listening to the words of the 2 waiters, Conrad's face flashed a trace of frustration, but it quickly disappeared. He turned around and was about to leave. He is really a bit too obedient. "Hey, don't leave, I will treat you." Seeing that Conrad was about to leave, Jiang Hai immediately pulled him and said loudly. At this time, after the 2 waiters heard Jiang Hai's words, they couldn't help but have an awkward look on their faces. But now, they couldn't say anything, so they could only retreat to the side and pretend that nothing happened. "Conrad, you are dirty." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Conrad still insisted on leaving, but to his surprise, Jiang Hai's hand grabbed his hand like an iron ring, making him unable to move at all. This was the first time Conrad lost to someone in strength, but he didn't care. Instead, he looked back at Jiang Hai, pointed to himself, and said, "It's okay, come on." Jiang Hai smiled. "Isn't a service agency supposed to serve others? Conrad and I are consumers now. Not to mention that Conrad is only a little dirty, and there is no other smell on him except for the smell of blood. Even if a person's body is stained with excrement, this place shouldn't reject others, right?" Under Jiang Hai's tugging, Conrad sat at a table for 4 and looked at the people around him nervously. Jiang Hai, on the other hand, went to buy hamburgers. He had already eaten breakfast, but the smell of the hamburgers made him hungry again. So he ordered 3 3-story imperial castles, 2 large cups of cola, and a bag of fries. After that, he returned to Conrad. Seeing that Jiang Hai brought back the food, Conrad immediately took a sip of his drink without saying a word. His fan-like hands grabbed 2 imperial castles, 1 in each hand, tore off the wrapper, and stuffed them into his big mouth. Jiang Hai could eat 2 imperial castles to fill his stomach, but this guy ate 2 as if they were just filling the bottom. After the 2 imperial castles disappeared in a few mouthfuls, he picked up Jiang Hai's hamburgers. Seeing this scene, Jiang Hai couldn't help but buy 3 more. This time, Jiang Hai took 1 and ate it himself. Sure enough, after eating 3 imperial castles, Conrad picked up 2 more and ate them, 1 on the left and 1 on the right. Unfortunately, 5 imperial castles weren't enough to satisfy his appetite. Seeing that he was about to finish, Jiang Hai went to buy 4 more. Looking at Conrad's ferocious eating, the other diners at the side were dumbfounded. When Conrad came in, these people who didn't know what was going on were still a little uneasy. But when they saw him destroy the imperial castles one after another, they were also a little dumbfounded. They had seen people who could eat a lot, but they had never seen someone who could eat so much. In total, Conrad ate 11 pieces of the 3-story imperial castle before he stopped with satisfaction. "You a good man." After finishing the last of his drink, Conrad grinned at Jiang Hai and said with a serious face, haha, are you full? If not, let's continue." Looking at Conrad's appearance, Jiang Hai said seriously. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Conrad raised his head and said slowly, "I'm full. It can last for 3 days, 2 days. Hey boss, you are here. The minibus is already here. Let's go." "Hey, why is he here?" But at this time, the door of Burger King was pushed open, and Moses Adams came in from the outside. When Aphrodite and the others came down, they didn't find Jiang Hai. They thought that Jiang Hai and Moses Adams were together. As a result, when Moses Adams came down, he didn't find Jiang Hai. They were a little curious, but fortunately, the people at the front desk saw that Jiang Hai took Conrad to the burger shop opposite. So Moses Adams came to find him. When he came in, he saw Jiang Hai, and of course, Conrad opposite Jiang Hai. Seeing Moses Adams come in, Jiang Hai also looked at him. "Do you know him?" Pointing to Conrad opposite, Jiang Hai asked curiously. "Of course. Didn't we see him when we went there?" Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Moses Adams said seriously, "It seems that you still remember. Then why is he lying on the hotel lawn? Didn't he win that day?" Looking at Moses Adams, Jiang Hai asked curiously. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Moses Adams couldn't help but recall. Compared to Jiang Hai, who only went there once, Moses Adams went there several times in order to follow up on the matters that happened later. He also heard about this situation from his old classmate. "Oh, I heard that it was because his injuries were quite serious. If he were to be treated, he would have to spend a lot of money, so his accomplice cheated him. After cheating him out of all his money, they threw him away. I didn't expect him to be in front of our hotel." Thinking hard about it, Moses Adams remembered his old friend's news and couldn't help but sigh. The gray world is like this. There is no law, no morality. Everything is based on survival. Sometimes humans are the cruelest creatures in the world. This is the law of nature. "Oh, there's such a story?" Hearing his words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but be a little surprised. To be honest, Jiang Hai thought of many possibilities at the beginning, but he really didn't think of this possibility. However, Jiang Hai wasn't running a charity. Although this person's experience made Jiang Hai feel a little emotional, he felt that he did a good job by treating him to a meal. After all, he didn't have any relationship with this man. The reason why he did this was mainly because he was in a good mood now. So after hearing this, Jiang Hai stood up, took out $200 from his wallet, and put it in front of Conrad. "Big guy, I'm leaving. This money is for you to buy food. This time, don't be cheated by others." Looking at Conrad, Jiang Hai smiled and turned to leave, but Conrad grabbed his arm. Jiang Hai turned around and looked at Conrad in surprise. To be honest, Jiang Hai was a little surprised. His first thought now was that he was being blamed, but obviously he was thinking too much because Conrad grabbed Jiang Hai's arm, but didn't take the money on the table. Instead, he looked at Jiang Hai and said in a muffled voice, "I can't take the money." "Oh, why?" Hearing his words, Jiang Hai was also a little surprised. What did he mean by that? "My mom said that I can take other people's money. Money is earned through labor." Looking at Jiang Hai, Conrad's head and tongue were obviously not very clear as he spoke to Jiang Hai. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but be a little stunned. "Your mom is right, but this money is your reward for chatting with me. You better take it." Looking at this big guy, Jiang Hai smiled, but didn't take the money back. Instead, he smiled and said to him. Then, Jiang Hai activated his strength. Although this Conrad was quite strong, he was still nothing in front of Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai instantly shook off his arm. Then, Jiang Hai left the shop. But as soon as he left, Conrad followed him out, still holding the $200 that Jiang Hai gave him in his hand. Seeing this scene, Jiang Hai didn't say anything. He was just being kind occasionally, and there was no need to say too much. But just as they were about to cross the road and head to the front of the bus in front of the hotel, the roar of an engine suddenly came from the distance, followed by an MPV speeding over from a corner. Chapter 320. Again, Jiang Hai narrowed his eyes when he saw the car rushing towards him and accelerating instead of slowing down. Such a situation had happened not long ago, and he had to spend $30 million to settle it. This time, he didn't know who had the guts to attack him again. Jiang Hai pulled Moses Adams' clothes and pushed him straight towards the hotel. Jiang Hai exerted force in his legs and prepared to move back in an instant. With his explosive strength, it was impossible for the car to hit him, especially when he was mentally prepared. But just as Jiang Hai was about to leave, he saw Conrad, who was originally behind him, rush over. With a bang, he knocked Jiang Hai away and replaced Jiang Hai's position. This position was not so easy to replace. Jiang Hai heard a loud bang, and Conrad was sent flying by the speeding car. Years of internal injuries, coupled with his weak body, caused him to pass out when he was knocked out. The injury on his head also split open from the impact. However, the car did not have it easy either. After hitting Conrad, the car also turned a corner and crashed straight into the Carnival Hotel next to it. In an instant, it hit the lawn of the hotel and then hit the stone in front of the hotel. Bastard! Looking at Conrad's situation, Jiang Hai could not help but curse. These people attacked him again and again. He wanted to see who was the one who did not want to live this time. Jiang Hai glanced at Conrad, who was still far away, and motioned for Moses, Adams, to make a call. He went straight to the front of the car and smashed the window of the driver's seat with a bang. He wanted to open the door, but just as his hand smashed the window, he heard many women screaming inside. What's the situation? When he heard these women screaming, Jiang Hai felt that something was wrong. But when he pulled the door down, the situation inside made Jiang Hai's right eyelid twitch unconsciously. Because at this time in the car, the driver had already been knocked out by the ejected airbag. His face was covered in blood, and it seemed that his nose was broken. Except for the driver, the others were still conscious. When they saw Jiang Hai, they did not stop screaming. It was not because they saw that Jiang Hai was too handsome, but because it was a car full of women, including the driver. It seemed that they were a group of 17 or 18 years old students. They were obviously confused and had nothing else to do except scream. Looking at these women, Jiang Hai's sixth sense told him that this was really an accident. Damn, a road killer is also a killer. If you don't know how to drive, why are you driving? At the sight of the fainted female driver, Jiang Hai knew that he had encountered the legendary road killer. He cursed helplessly. Jiang Hai walked away again. Moses, Adams, also called the police. After calling the ambulance, he came to the front of the car. Looking at the situation inside, Moses, Adams also looked at Jiang Hai helplessly. Obviously, it was difficult to reason with the female driver. This incident should not be deliberate. It could only be regarded as an accident. There was no other way except through the judicial process. Even if Jiang Hai wanted to sue them for murder, he had no way to do so. Because in this world, not only domestic female drivers were real murderers. Other than admitting that he was unlucky, there was nothing he could do. It was impossible for Jiang Hai to know this group of brats. At this time, Aphrodite and others also came out of the hotel. Seeing that Jiang Hai was fine, they were relieved. Although Miami was good, beautiful, and comfortable, they were not going to come here in the future because it seemed that this place was not suitable for Jiang Hai. Soon after they got out of the car, the police and paramedics came. When the police arrived, it was just a normal interrogation. The girls who were masked 13 were also brought out. Jiang Hai listened for a while and understood that these girls had some relationship with Jiang Hai because they were also from Boston, but they went to college in Boston. In order to celebrate the birthday of one of the girls, they decided to drive together. As a result, they originally just wanted to go back to Washington. They thought that since they were already here and there was an accident after driving for so long, they wanted to go directly to Florida to play. As a result, when they were about to reach their destination, an accident happened. Looking at their confused look, the police also shrugged. It was not the first time they dealt with such a case. So after finishing the statement, they directly took these girls to the police station. Although the police dealt with it quickly, there were some problems with the paramedics. This person must be saved. This was in the spirit of humanitarianism, but the saved person had nothing else except an American household registration. Whether it was medical insurance, friends, or even an address, it made the hospital a little helpless. Because if they saved this person, it was very likely that the money would not be recovered. Of course, in the end, it was estimated that the money would be recovered from those girls. But what if the girls' family did not give it to them? Then they would have to trouble them. But the doctors here, although they were giving first aid, seemed a little absent-minded. Jiang Hai still had a plane in a while. Although he was also a victim, he just asked Moses Adams to follow up. But before he got in the car, he saw Conrad over there. Go and have a look. If you need medical expenses, I will pay all, Jiang Hai said to Moses Adams. Then he went to the minibus first and leaned in the middle of the last row. Jiang Hai raised his head helplessly. How could such a thing happen after he left? After hearing Jiang Hai's words, Moses Adams also went over and said something to the doctor here. After leaving his phone number, he returned to the car. When the minibus drove away, Jiang Hai also glanced at Conrad behind. Sure enough, with a big lawyer as a guarantor, the paramedics' actions became faster. Soon the bleeding stopped, and he was sent to the hospital in the ambulance. Jiang Hai did not know what would happen to Conrad in the end, because at this time, he was a little homesick. From Miami to Boston, a 3-hour flight was not very difficult, especially in the first-class cabin. After watching 2 movies, Jiang Hai had already landed in Boston's General Barton Airport. When they came out of the airport, they saw that there were already people waiting for them in the airport's parking lot. Jiang Hai looked around and found that there were a lot of people. After Jiang Hai, Robbins Garcia, and Edward Anderson left, the 2 people in charge of the manor naturally came. In addition, there was also Burkdollar. The 3 of them drove 3 pickup trucks so that they could pick up Jiang Hai and the others. In fact, Jiang Hai's battle shield only needed to move the seats, and it was not a problem to seat 10 people. However, Jiang Hai's battle shield could not be driven by anyone except him. It was his treasure. In addition to the 3 of them, there was also a girl standing there. This girl was not Shinny Clive, but Penelope Dollar, whom Jiang Hai had not seen for a while. Since the last police station incident, she had not appeared in front of Jiang Hai again. Perhaps she did not like Jiang Hai, or perhaps she did not want to have anything to do with her father's boss. Now, she was here to pick up Moses Adams. Don't forget, she was Adams' assistant. However, with her presence, the atmosphere in the parking lot was a little strange. Burkdollar and his girl did not get along very well. Hey, boss, did everything go well this time? Seeing Jiang Hai and the others coming over, Robbins Garcia stepped forward and hugged Jiang Hai, then said with a smile, "That's natural. With me in charge, there's nothing that can't go smoothly." Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also laughed. Oomph. Looking at Jiang Hai's proud look, Penelope Dollar couldn't help but snort softly, but although the sound was soft, it was still heard by Jiang Hai. When Jiang Hai looked at her, she deliberately looked away. "So, your throats are better now? You can talk now?" Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Edward Anderson looked at these girls and said with a surprised look. He had to admit that technology is really advanced now. Of course, Uncle Anderson. Maybe children have the intention to show off. Hearing Anderson's words, Aphrodite and the others held back and just nodded with a smile, but Daliana had already spoken. Listening to Daliana's crisp voice, Anderson and the others were very surprised. They originally thought that she could speak, which means that she could make sounds. It would take some time before she could communicate normally, but what did they hear now? They didn't expect that Daliana and the others could speak so fluently when they came back, which really surprised them. This is really a miracle. Even Burkdollar, who has always been silent, couldn't help but whisper at this time. Looking at everyone's surprised look, Jiang Hai just smiled and didn't say anything because he didn't want to explain. Sometimes, some words are meaningless if they're too obvious. After a few words of greeting each other, Jiang Hai and the others also got in the car to go home. As for Moses Adams, his home is in Boston. He also said goodbye to Jiang Hai and left the airport in Penelope's car. Jiang Hai and the others also left the airport. One went north and the other went south. The incident in Miami came to an end. Sitting in the co-driver's seat of his original car, the F-650, Jiang Hai looked at the scenery in front of him that was becoming more and more familiar. Although the weather in Miami is better than here, the fish there grow faster than here, and the rhythm there is slower than here, don't forget that this is actually Jiang Hai's home. Chapter 321. I'm finally back. After opening the door of the villa, Jiang Hai threw himself heavily on the sofa and Xiao Bai, little yellow, dyed teeth, and chirps who got up with him immediately ran to his side and kept rubbing against him. In fact, the moment Jiang Hai got out of the car, his pets ran over and surrounded him in the middle, constantly licking and rubbing against him to show their affection for Jiang Hai. It didn't even take this long for Jiang Hai to return to China last time. More than 10 days. He stayed there for more than 10 days. They didn't see Jiang Hai for half a month, so Little Gray and the others naturally missed him very much. Now that Jiang Hai was back, it would be strange if they didn't linger around him. Looking at these lively little guys, Jiang Hai first comforted them when he got out of the car. Coming back from the airport in the spirit of a gentleman, well, Jiang Hai himself is not a gentleman. But at least it was necessary to send the girls back first. So Jiang Hai took a group of pets and sent Aphrodite and the others back to his small villa. Under the reluctant eyes of these girls, Jiang Hai waved his sleeves and didn't take away a single cloud. Back to his villa, Delina and Marion were the first to come in, and at this time, they were tidying up the room. As for Jiang Hai, he didn't care about his image at all and just lay on the sofa. It's really better to be in one's own doghouse. Unknowingly, Jiang Hai has been here for almost half an hour. At this time, Delina and Marion came down from above. After the 3-hour flight, they were also very tired. After coming back, they first tidied up their things, then took a shower and changed into clean clothes before coming down. Seeing Jiang Hai lying there without caring about his image, they also came over. Jiang Hai, home is still the most comfortable. Lying on the back of the sofa, Delina looked at Jiang Hai and said with narrowed eyes, "Of course, this is our home. Have you packed your things?" After hearing Delina's words, Jiang Hai nodded affirmatively. Initially, he felt that it was a pity that he didn't choose to live in Miami. But as soon as he returned home, he no longer had such thoughts. Even if he would freeze like a dog in Winthrop in winter, it was still a unique experience. "We've already finished packing. Jiang Hai, do you want us to help you pack your things?" Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Marion immediately said with a smile. This time they went to Miami, they also harvested a lot of new clothes and some gadgets. "I can do it myself." At the mention of his luggage, Jiang Hai, who hadn't fully stretched himself yet, suddenly remembered that he still had $400 million worth of oil futures in his suitcase. He wouldn't be at ease if he didn't take them with him. So Jiang Hai forced himself to get rid of his fatigue. After saying goodbye to the two girls, he quickly ran to the second floor. He opened his suitcase. The square thing was sealed in a pocket at this time. Jiang Hai deliberately took it out and checked it. After confirming that there was no problem, he walked to his bed. Although Jiang Hai's bed is made of solid wood, it can still be pulled open. With the strength of his arms, the huge bed, bedboard, and mattress were lifted up by him. After that, they were supported by a hydraulic rod. After that, he slowly walked in. At the end of the bed, there was a small safe. But although this safe was small, it was the most expensive thing in Jiang Hai's house. According to money, this safe cost Jiang Hai too. 17 million. This was also the latest model of safe in Germany. It looked like an ordinary metal box, but in fact this safe was not an ordinary existence. There were a total of 5 layers of trivia, password, fingerprint, iris, and the way to open it. If even one of them was wrong, the safe wouldn't open. If 3 mistakes were wrong, it would be permanently locked. As for forcibly breaking it, at least for now, it was impossible. Because this safe was made of chromium iridium alloy, nothing could ever cut it open. This was why such a small safe was worth more than $2 million. After Jiang Hai entered his 5 procedures in order, he opened the box in front of him. Other people bought safes to store money or precious stones, but Jiang Hai's safes were filled with a pile of paper. For Jiang Hai, he wasn't interested in gems. Compared to gems, these papers were more valuable. Because the papers that were originally placed here were the manor's deeds, but now there was an extra stack of papers. Of course, the main reason was that his safe was really small, so small that it couldn't hold too many things. After resetting the safe, Jiang Hai left the bed and restored the bed to its original state. Jiang Hai also relaxed. The 400 million yuan oil futures was his last bargaining chip. Under normal circumstances, he wouldn't use it. Relieved, Jiang Hai began to tidy up his bed, put his clothes in the wardrobe, and then went to take a shower. When he came out of the shower, he found that his phone was ringing. Hello. Jiang Hai curiously glanced at the name displayed on the phone. This made Jiang Hai a little surprised because the person displayed on the phone was not someone else. It was his former classmate, Feng Yunshun, who had a night with him in China. But to be honest, if he didn't see this name, Jiang Hai would have almost forgotten her. Now, why did she call him? Phew, I finally got through to you. I thought you blacklisted me. As soon as the phone was connected, Feng Yunshun's slightly shy voice came from the other side, and Jiang Hai couldn't help but feel excited. Oh, cough. I was taking a shower just now. What's the matter? With an awkward cough, Jiang Hai asked strangely. This woman really hasn't called me before. What does this sudden call mean? Can I call you if there's nothing? Really? Okay, I won't mess with you. You promised me to let me go to your place to take a photo. Is it still reliable? Hearing Jiang Hai's explanation, Feng Yunshun first despised Jiang Hai, and then said to Jiang Hai casually, but the meaning of inquiry in her words was still very strong. Of course, no problem. You can come whenever you want. After recalling for a while, Jiang Hai naturally remembered that he had promised her. Originally, he thought it was just a polite remark, but he didn't expect that the other party really came to find him. However, Jiang Hai didn't care because he didn't care much about this, and he was very happy to have a friend come to play with him, especially his relationship with this friend was still unclear. So that's great. Do you have a place to stay? Maybe I won't come alone. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Feng Yunshun couldn't help but exclaim in surprise on the other side of the phone, but then her voice became smaller, and she said to Jiang Hai, if too many people come, I may not be able to stay because other than my villa, all the other houses are occupied. If there are fewer people, I have enough guest rooms here. After thinking about it, he heard that there would be a lot of people when taking a photo. Jiang Hai couldn't afford to entertain so many people, so he said it vaguely. Oh, it's okay. It's just me and his sister. It's enough to have a room. We're not big shots. We'll bring our own makeup and clothes. When we take photos, we'll take photos with each other, but you have to help with the lighting or something. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Feng Yunshun also laughed. This is not a problem. That's okay. I have no problem. When are you coming? Hearing Feng Yunshun say that there are only 2 people, Jiang Hai doesn't care. He still has a lot of guest rooms here. Not to mention 2, even 5 is within his acceptable range. Since you're here, then there's no problem. We'll leave on tomorrow's flight. Hearing that Jiang Hai has no problem, Feng Yunshun also showed the straightforwardness of Bing City's girls and said directly to Jiang Hai. When he heard that they would come tomorrow, Jiang Hai couldn't help but think about it. It's a 13-hour flight. According to the domestic flight, they will arrive almost the day after tomorrow. Okay, are you going to New York for a transfer or what? I'll pick you up in New York or Boston. Jiang Hai is quite satisfied that he can have a day to rest. The most important thing is that he has already said it, so he has to do it. It's better to be in New York. I haven't been to New York yet. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Feng Yunshun couldn't help but whisper. This time, they mainly have to trouble Jiang Hai. If Jiang Hai said that he would pick them up in Boston, then they can only transfer. Now that Jiang Hai asked, she will tell him her thoughts. After all, for a young person, New York, the world's economic center, is very attractive. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also laughed. Okay, no problem. After all, it's only a 3-hour drive from his manor to New York, which is not particularly far. This time, they are fellow countrymen and it's not clear. Jiang Hai still has patience. After setting the time, Jiang Hai hung up the phone and put the phone in his pocket casually. Jiang Hai went downstairs. Unknowingly, it's getting late. He still has to prepare dinner. He is not hungry, but Daliana and Marian are hungry. When Jiang Hai went to prepare dinner, in the capital of Huaxia, in a high-end office building, Feng Yunshun also hung up the phone with a chuckle. She looked at a middle-aged man in front of her with a proud face, and the middle-aged man's face was a little embarrassed and flattering. Because to be exact, this middle-aged man is Feng Yunshun's boss, but everyone in the company knows that there is someone behind Feng Yunshun. That person's power is something that the boss of a small management company can't afford to provoke. It's done. I can go now. Feng Yunshan has applied to go to the United States to take photos since 2 months ago, but the company has not let her go. First, because she is very popular, and there are still some brands and car shows that need her. Second, because the cost of going to the United States is really high, and Feng Yunshan did not say that she will pay for herself, so the company is very tangled. Chapter 322. Some people can't live without love. For example, Fu Yuan, this guy got another girlfriend a few days ago, but at most, he only touched her hand. He didn't even kiss her on the lips. After that, he cried and complained to Jiang Hai on WeChat. But Jiang Hai and the rest were used to it, because he was like this in the past. Now, they can't be bothered with him. If Jiang Hai remembered correctly, this was this guy's fourth girlfriend this year. Now, he is actively looking for a girlfriend. This is a person who will die without love. For some people, when love comes knocking on their door, they will accept it. Without love, they will stay passive. For example, Jiang Hai's other classmate, Su Wei. He is now staying at home all day. He met a girl from Sichuan on the internet. The two of them have been talking on the internet for 3 years, but they haven't even met. They said they're boyfriend and girlfriend, but he didn't ask her to come to Bing City, and she didn't ask him to come to Sichuan. This made Jiang Hai and the rest speechless. Is this okay? There are also some people who are too platonic. There's also a type of person who doesn't care if there is love or not. They can live without the opposite sex, and they can live very well. Feng Yunshan is such a person. All these years, she has been that person's mistress. Although they don't meet many times, she has saved a lot of money. Since she had sex with Jiang Hai, she stopped contacting that person this year. And that person doesn't know if it's because he feels guilty, but the room that Feng Yunshan stayed in is still hers. And every month, he would send her money, but he never came to look for her again. Feng Yunshan doesn't care. It's good to have a house to live in and money to spend. As for the company not letting her go to the United States to take photos, she said a few words at first, but later, she forgot about it. Maybe if this continues, Feng Yunshan might continue to live like this. But the bad thing is, the day before yesterday, when Feng Yunshan passed by Qi Li's Western restaurant, she found that Qi Li and Jiang Hai seemed to be getting closer. This made her a little anxious. Who is Qi Li? Wouldn't it be as easy as playing with her? She knew that there must be something going on between Qi Li and Jiang Hai. As long as Qi Li wanted to, not only would she not be able to survive, but the person behind her would also be finished. The reason why she was fine now was mainly because of her relationship with Jiang Hai. Therefore, she was really determined this time. She insisted on going to America for a photo shoot, but her boss was still unwilling to let her go. Even though she said that she only wanted the company's travel expenses and equipment, her boss was still a little conflicted. In the end, her boss said that as long as she contacted the location and brought a newcomer there, he would take care of the travel expenses and equipment. That was how the conversation on the screen happened. Sister Chun, if you say there's no problem, then there's no problem. Looking at Feng Yunshan, the manager said with an apologetic smile, Tisk, if it wasn't for my strength, would you have let him go? What a joke. Tell me, which little slut do you want me to bring along this time? Casually putting her bag on the table, Feng Yunshan took out a woman's cigarette and lit it gently in her mouth. After exhaling a puff of smoke, she said to the manager, Actually, Feng Yunshan didn't know how to smoke. What she smoked now was just through the barrel. She spat it out after one round in her mouth. This was actually something that couldn't be helped. In this industry, if she didn't mingle a little, then anyone would dare to ride on her head. Xiaoxi, come in. Hearing her words, the manager smiled awkwardly and then shouted outside. Then, as the door opened, a beautiful figure appeared in front of Feng Yunshan. Even when Feng Yunshan saw this person, she couldn't help but be stunned for a moment, because this woman was indeed very beautiful. Sister Chun, let me introduce you. This is AI Xiaoxi, our company's newly signed artist. Now, she's going to shoot her debut photo. Instead of shooting in the country, it's better to go abroad to have more influence. This time, I'll have to trouble you, Sister Chun. Looking at the beautiful girl standing there, the manager stood up. His perverted hand unconsciously touched the girl named AI Xiaoxi's arm. When the girl was touched, she subconsciously shrank back, but she didn't dare to dodge. The aggrieved expression on her face also flashed by. Oh, when did you take care of a newcomer like this? Your little secretary? The manager's action and AI Xiaoxi's expression were all reflected in Feng Yunshen's eyes. She knew that there must be a story behind this, but this industry had its own rules. If someone was willing to hit or suffer, then it had nothing to do with her. However, a few teasing words were inevitable. Hey, you can't speak carelessly. If my wife hears it, you guys can go to the moat to fish me out tomorrow. Hearing Feng Yunshen's words, the manager panicked a little and immediately said, Hey, I'm too lazy to care about your damn business. Little girl, come with me. I'll give you a few instructions. Feng Yunshen looked at this lecherous but cowardly guy with disdain. She stood up and said to AI Xiaoxi as she walked out. Hearing Feng Yunshen's words, AI Xiaoxi's eyes flashed with a trace of gratitude. After bowing to the manager, she immediately left with Feng Yunshen. After leaving the manager's office, she also let out a long breath. That, Sister Chun, thank you. Seeing Feng Yunshen continue to walk forward, she immediately chased after her and whispered, You don't have to thank me. Although I don't know why you want to be in this industry, you have to understand that in this industry, being so shy won't work. Unless you're pretending to be shy to attract other people's chips, otherwise, you have to be more open. Since you've made a choice, it's fine as long as you don't regret it. Okay, you go back and pack up. We'll fly to the United States the day after tomorrow. Glancing at the girl behind her, Feng Yunshen couldn't help but remember her appearance when she first entered the industry. It was really an unbearable experience. She was forced to drink, framed, and beaten by a female colleague in the same company in the toilet. But fortunately, she survived these things. Now she, Feng Yunshen, no matter whether she is a fox pretending to be a tiger or not, in this company, she means what she says, and this all depends on practice. Then what do I have to prepare? Hearing Feng Yunshen's words, the girl named AI Xiaoxi asked timidly, Take all your sexy clothes with you and wash yourself clean. Don't think that we're going to have fun this time. We're going to work. Who knows, we might even have to serve men. Hearing AI Xiaoxi's words, Feng Yunshen waved her hand and strode out of the company. The appearance of this AI Xiaoxi suddenly made her a little annoyed. Hearing Feng Yunshen's words, AI Xiaoxi's face couldn't help but turn pale in an instant. She was already mentally prepared for the first thing, but the latter sentence. But she didn't dare to ask now, so she could only go home nervously. At this time, Jiang Hai didn't know the situation in Huaxia. Now he was eating steak at home happily. He had to admit that Jiang Hai's steak was good. Even if it was not well done, the raw materials made up for all the shortcomings in craftsmanship. After eating a delicious dinner, Jiang Hai went back to sleep. After sleeping in the big bed of the hotel for many days, Jiang Hai suddenly returned to the bed he was used to. For the first time, Jiang Hai didn't roll for long and fell asleep. After getting up early the next morning, Jiang Hai also started his schedule for the day. Of course, it was not right to call his schedule, because it was mainly in the manner. He first went to the cowshed and gave Garcia and the others gifts. There were only two kinds of gift that Jiang Hai picked when he came back, wine and straw hats. The straw hats were for all the women in the manor, and the wine was naturally for the cowboys, fishermen, Dulles Gerard, and O'Connor Murphy. After Jiang Hai had a taste of their wine in Miami, he had recently become interested in those slightly sweet wines. When he came back, he deliberately brought a lot of bottles, 1 bottle for each person, and he could still have more than 10 bottles left. After delivering the wine, Jiang Hai also looked at the cows. After finding that there was no problem with them, he also learned about the situation of the cows from Garcia. During the half a month when Jiang Hai was away, except for Chi Li, both Zhang Dehai and Peralton had contacted the warehouse, transportation, and so on. They had also come here to pick the cows. In about a week or so, they would come to slaughter the cows they picked. The first batch of cows was a total of 1,200, of which 1,000 were Prawaltons and 200 were Zhangdi Hais. These were all already studied, so Jiang Hai did not have to worry about it. After walking around the cowshed and riding Xiaoxia for a while, Jiang Hai went to the beach. He also delivered wine to Edward Anderson and asked about the recent problems of the fishing industry. The news that they received was quite good. Among the fish that Jiang Hai raised, the biggest one was almost mature. This made Edward Anderson very surprised. This was because they originally thought that Jiang Hai's fish would take at least 3 years to mature, while the salmon would take at least a year to mature. Next year, March to May would be the right time for the fish to bloom. But this time, Jiang Hai's fish would be ready to bloom. As for the American red fish, which had the largest population, it would take about 1.5 to 2 years to mature. However, it had only been 2 months, and the speed at which the fish grew caught them by surprise. A few days ago, they fished out a long zhu at a fixed location. This guy had already grown to 50 centimeters long. An adult fish was only 60 to 70 centimeters long. This guy had only been put in for 2 months, and it had already grown so big. It really scared AI Dehua and the others. If they did not know that this kind of fish did not exist in the Atlantic Ocean, they would have suspected that it had swum over. As for the American redfish, they had grown to more than 25 centimeters, which was almost the same length as raising them for a year. Chapter 3:23. Maybe the water quality here is better. Hearing Edward Anderson's words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile awkwardly. Of course, he knew what was going on. It was nothing more than his aura. Before entering the ocean, Jiang Hai used his own spiritual qi to nourish these fish and the like. Although there were millions of fish fry, such a small amount of spiritual energy was not enough for them to evolve, but could ensure their survival to the greatest extent, in addition to allowing them to grow quickly. In addition, the seaweed planted by Jiang Hai also added aura. After the seaweed itself grew, it exuded a subtle aura, improving the plankton around it. The small fish and shrimp that ate these seaweed and plankton would also increase their weight and physical fitness after absorbing the aura. When the fry ate these small fish and shrimp and digested the aura, they would naturally grow faster, which was also an innate advantage. However, Jiang Hai knew this matter, but it didn't mean that he would tell others. He was not prepared to share this secret with anyone. I hope so. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Edward Anderson also nodded. In fact, from the beginning, he felt that Jiang Hai was not an ordinary person, but what did it matter? As long as he didn't endanger him, it didn't matter. The fish here grew big, and it was a gift from God, so Edward Anderson still calmly accepted Jiang Hai's words. As for the others, as long as he didn't care, they naturally wouldn't care. After patrolling his territory and giving gifts to everyone, Jiang Hai drove to the town with a special gift. He naturally came here to give a gift. The person who gave the gift was none other than Shinny Clive. If it weren't for her relationship, Jiang Hai wouldn't have gone to Miami, let alone make money. Not to mention Delina's illness, Jiang Hai would have definitely come to give her a gift, whether it was for public or private reasons. Before coming, Jiang Hai didn't call Shinny Clive, which was a surprise. When he drove to the town, it was obvious that the people in the town were relatively friendly to Jiang Hai. In the winter, it was no secret that Jiang Hai funded the construction of a primary school. At the same time, Jiang Hai also participated in the Sea God ceremony last time, so everyone had some impression of Jiang Hai. Seeing him driving to the town, many people greeted him. Jiang Hai naturally responded to them one by one. He really didn't expect that he was so popular here. On the way to Winthrop Primary School, there was a red light in the town. Jiang Hai naturally had to stop at the red light. When he stopped, he happened to see a flower shop on the roadside. Jiang Hai couldn't help but be stunned. Although Jiang Hai was a bit dull, he was not stupid. The gift he gave was not small, but it was not very good. Women all like flowers. He had never given flowers in his life. After thinking for a while, Jiang Hai parked the car on the roadside and walked into the flower shop. As soon as he walked in, a girl came to Jiang Hai. "Hello, do you want to buy flowers?" Hearing the girl's loud voice, Jiang Hai glanced at her. The girl didn't look very old, but she wasn't young either. She was about 17 or 18 years old, about 7 meters tall, with 2 braids on her blonde hair. She wasn't very good looking, but she was very bright. There were some small freckles on her face, which made her look very cute. At this time, she was standing in front of Jiang Hai with a smile and asked Jiang Hai with a smile, "Oh, yes, I want to buy a bunch of flowers. Do you have any recommendations?" Looking at the messy variety of flowers in the flower shop, Jiang Hai couldn't help but have a headache. To be honest, he didn't recognize 9 out of 10 of these flowers. "Are you going to give it to your girlfriend?" Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the girl couldn't help but squint her eyes and smile. Not yet. Is there anything special about this?" Hearing the girl's words and thinking back to Shite Clive, although Jiang Hai had some feelings for her, the two hadn't reached the point of being friends. At least, Jiang Hai didn't think that it was suitable for him to be friends with others before he and Shi Li had completely broken up. It could be seen that the girl was very talkative. Hearing Jiang Hai's doubts, she explained to Jiang Hai, "Of course, every flower has a different flower language, such as roses. Different colors and different appearances naturally represent different meanings. Red roses represent passion. So basically, men and women who have confirmed their relationship will give red roses. Pink roses represent touching, a declaration of love. First love, if used for confession, it would be pink roses. White roses represent purity, which is not very suitable for a girlfriend. Yellow roses represent blessings. Generally speaking, when lovers give this to each other, it means that they're going to break up peacefully. Green roses represent youth. Generally, they're not given to lovers, but if some friends leave us at a young age, they can give this. Blue roses represent mystery, preciousness, and also represent something that can't be obtained. If you have a crush on someone, this is the best gift. Light blue roses are called blue roses, which represent commitment. The number of roses given is different, and there are different sayings. Purple represents romance. Indigo represents preciousness. Orange represents youthfulness. Light green represents innocence. Orange red represents friendship. Black represents challenge. And champagne represents happiness. This kind of Lori Massey is usually given to lovers who have left us. The girl could see Jiang Hai's hesitation. He definitely wanted to give it to this girl, especially since this girl was very likely to be related to Jiang Hai. If he wanted to give it to his mother or other people, he would definitely give it to them, and he wouldn't show a puzzled expression when she asked. Since he wanted to give roses, she naturally had to explain it clearly. There are so many things to pay attention to. Jiang Hai was very interested in animals, but as for flowers and plants, it was just so he really didn't study these things and see what they were. Now, he was a little confused. Although he understood the meaning of these flowers, Jiang Hai still couldn't make a decision, because there were some small problems between his relationship with Shite Clive. You already know the flower language, but you still can't make a decision. Can you tell me more? I can help you refer to it. Looking at Jiang Hai's appearance, the girl also smiled. It was her habit to help customers within her scope. More than friends, but not yet lovers. After thinking for a while, Jiang Hai used a word to describe his relationship with Shite Clive. Then it's like this. The outer circle of orange represents friendship, and the inner circle of pink represents your heart. It's not as conspicuous as red, and it's not like other colors. It doesn't point out the meaning of your heart. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the girl recommended. Okay, then it's like this. Hearing the girl's words, Jiang Hai also nodded. This kind of distribution was really good. Then how many do you want? I'll match the color for you. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the girl here said happily. 66. Our Huaxia is more particular about this. After thinking for a while, Jiang Hai said to the girl, in fact, in Europe and the United States, although the number of flowers sent is a little particular, is not very particular. Other than the unlucky number 13, everything else was fine. It was unlike in China, where 11 was wholeheartedly dedicated. In fact, it was more of a homophone. Although there was a limit to the number of gifts given here, it was not a lot. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the girl also laughed. 66 flowers is a big job, so she immediately began to do it. Not long after, a bouquet of 66 flowers appeared in front of Jiang Hai. The price of the flowers is naturally different, but Jiang Hai bought the better ones. Of course, whether it is good or not is up to the girl. So 80 cents per flower, 66 flowers are $42.24 in total. Jiang Hai directly gave her $50, and the rest is her tip. Holding the flowers, Jiang Hai went to the car, put the flowers in the passenger seat, and drove to the town's elementary school. When he arrived, the elementary school was about to be over. Although it is a public elementary school, cars are really too popular in the United States. Just like bicycles in China, almost every family has one, and the price is not expensive. Although the Americans don't spoil their children as much as the people in China, in addition to taking the school bus, there are naturally people who come to pick up the elementary school. So when Jiang Hai arrived, there are already a lot of cars parked outside the elementary school. Of course, there are parents next to the cars. However, the quality of the parents in the United States is really good. At least, there is no one blocking the road. Everyone consciously lined up in a long line, and the people who came later lined up at the back. There is no one who wants to push forward. Although Jiang Hai wasn't here to pick up the children, he was here to pick up people. So he didn't push to the front. Instead, he lined up at the back. When his car stopped, many people around him turned to look at him. In fact, although the War Shield is much lower than the F-650 and F-750, the metal feel of the material, coupled with the domineering appearance, is indeed very attractive, especially to some men. Few men are not interested in these things. Guns, weapons, cars, airplanes, battleships, tanks, and so on. These things show the character of a man, no matter the time, are extremely attractive. Of course, there are some girls who are not in this category. It seems that Jiang Hai has unknowingly opened his mouth again. But at this time, he does not have any thoughts, and jumped out of the car with a bouquet of flowers. Chapter 3:24. Oh, it's him. When Jiang Hai jumped out of the car, many people who had been paying attention to him couldn't help but say, "Oh." Originally, when the battle shield was driven here, many people were curious about whose car it was. After all, this car was not very common, even in the United States. Of course, if it was in some rich areas, there would still be some. However, Winthrop was not a place where people could afford to live. Most of the cars here were basically Ford, Chevrolet, Buick, and so on. Of course, there are also some Japanese cars. After all, Japanese cars were very cheap here. Jiang Hai's car was definitely very expensive here. So when Jiang Hai drove over, they were curious about who the owner of the car was. When Jiang Hai got out of the car, they all said, "Oh, it was Jiang Hai's car." Based on their understanding, Jiang Hai was worthy of being the richest man in Winthrop. Holding the flowers and gifts, Jiang Hai ignored the gazes of the people around him and slowly walked to the school gate. When he walked to the school gate, the sound of the Winthrop Primary School being dismissed could be heard. The teachers in the United States almost never held classes, nor did they keep the students. Of course, they mainly targeted the primary school students. Their homework was practically non-existent. Therefore, as soon as school was over, some of the children who had been waiting for school to end were the first to rush out when the teacher announced the end of class. They went to their own wardrobes to change their shoes and clothes before running out. In the United States, regardless of whether it was primary school or middle school, the basic configuration was that every student had a special small cabinet in the corridor. Only the students had the keys to the cabinet. Inside the cabinet were clothes, books, shoes, and other sundries. In this way, when they went to school, they didn't need to carry too many things in their backpacks. If it wasn't a very important class, they could come here to get their things before class. It was a very convenient design. After the bell rang, in less than a minute, some anxious children ran out of the school. They glanced at Jiang Hai, who was standing at the gate. There was some curiosity in their eyes, but they didn't pay too much attention to him. For these children, now was the time to go home, eat, and go out to play. Seeing the children running past him one by one, Jiang Hai couldn't help but stretch his neck to look inside the school. After waiting for about 10 minutes, the corners of Jiang Hai's mouth curled up into a smile because the beautiful figure he was waiting for reflected in his eyes. The black woman who was talking to her was ignored by Jiang Hai. Sandy, seeing that SH-20 Clive was halfway away, Jiang Hai couldn't help but call out loudly. Hearing Jiang Hai's voice, SH-20 Clive was stunned. Then he turned his head in confusion and saw Jiang Hai standing there with flowers in his hands. The moment he saw Jiang Hai, SH-20 Clive's eyes flashed with excitement. He subconsciously took a step forward, but he seemed to think of something and immediately stopped. He looked at the black woman next to him apologetically. "Well, Sandy go, I won't laugh at you." The black woman saw SH-20 Clive's expression. Looking at his anxious look, the woman smiled and joked. "What are you talking about, Mary, really?" Although he said this, SH-20 Clive didn't slow down. He smiled apologetically at the black woman, and before he finished his words, he had already walked quickly toward Jiang Hai. Seeing SH-20 Clive coming over, Jiang Hai couldn't help but take a few steps forward. "You bad guy, when did you come back?" Seeing Jiang Hai coming over, SH-20 Clive asked him first before she could speak. It could be seen that she was very happy about Jiang Hai's sudden appearance. "I just came back last night. I rested for a while, then I immediately came to find you. This is for you." After Jiang Hai finished speaking, he gave the flowers in his hand and the gift he carefully prepared. "Oh, thank you." Looking at this big bouquet of flowers, SH-20 Clive couldn't help but smile. Her squinted eyes were full of love. Maybe at this time, if Jiang Hai gave her a green foxtail, she would be so happy. "Do you have an appointment tonight? Why don't we go eat something delicious?" Looking at SH-20 Clive's surprised look, Jiang Hai also said with a smile, "I want to eat at your house. I haven't eaten your steak for half a month. I miss it so much." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, SH-20 Clive also said happily. It was unknown whether she missed the steak or the owner of the steak. "Of course, no problem." Hearing SH-20 Clive's words, Jiang Hai also smiled and said with a serious face. Just as the two of them were about to leave to get their car, a red Ferrari suddenly sped over from a corner in the distance. When it arrived at the school gate, it braked and stopped steadily in front of the school gate. When they saw the car, not only SH-20 Clive but also the nearby parents and the guard showed a look of disgust on their faces. SH-20 Clive also looked at Jiang Hai with some concern. "Hey, Sandy, I booked a table at XX restaurant in Boston. Let's go now." The car stopped, and a man who looked 27 or 28 years old also came out of the car. This man is a pure white man. He is quite handsome. He has long blonde hair, and the whole person looks very refreshing. Although the temperature in Boston is not low now, this guy is not wearing thin clothes. Like Jiang Hai, today he only wore a t-shirt and a pair of thin trousers. But this guy was still wearing a leather coat like a maggot. Jiang Hai looked at him and felt hot. He is also holding a big stick of flowers in both hands, but the color is completely different from Jiang Hai's because it is a big stick of fiery red roses. If it was before, Jiang Hai might not care because he doesn't understand the language of flowers. But as soon as he was popularized, he knew that the meaning of this flower is not so simple. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai can't help but have some doubts. Is it my wishful thinking? This made him glance at SH-20 Clive next to him, but when he saw the strong disgust on SH-20 Clive's face, Jiang Hai laughed at himself. It seems that he is thinking too much. Then he couldn't help but look at this guy. He is so arrogant, and he doesn't know what the hell is going on. "This is for you. Let's go, Sandy." But when Jiang Hai was looking at him, this guy looked at Jiang Hai with disdain, then ignored Jiang Hai. He stretched out one hand, wanted to pass the flowers to SH-20 Clive, and the other hand was about to grab Sandy's arm. This made Jiang Hai really angry. Who does this guy think he is? Just when Jiang Hai was about to make a move, SH-20 Clive took the initiative to take a step back, leaned her body against Jiang Hai's side, and dodged the guy's hand. At the same time, she frowned and looked at this guy unhappily. "Mr. Kawei, we are not familiar with each other. Please call me Miss Clive, and I didn't say that I want to eat with you. I still have an appointment, and I think I said that this is a school, so don't park your car here. Looking at this guy, SH-20 Clive's face was full of disgust, and she said unhappily. Hearing her words, this guy couldn't help but laugh. In this town, I can park my car wherever I want. Who dares to stop me? The man named Kirk opened his hands and said arrogantly. Listening to his loud words, the people next to him glared at him, but no one dared to come and find trouble with him. Such a scene was really difficult to appear in the territory of the United States. You're driving so fast. Have you ever thought about what would happen if you hit someone? Hearing this, Jiang Hai felt that he couldn't stand it anymore. He patted SH-20 Clive's shoulder. This was the good thing about him. He was not afraid of power. It's none of your business. I like to drive fast. If I hit someone, I will pay. I have money. If you have the ability, you can find the police to punish me. This guy shook his shoulder proudly and looked at Jiang Hai with an arrogant face. His tone was really asking for a beating. If you say so, then I can sue you for murder. Because he had been with Moses Adams for a long time, Jiang Hai's eloquence had improved a little. He now knew how to put a big label on someone's head. Don't talk nonsense. You son of a b******. When did I commit murder? Accidentally hitting someone with a car and intentional murder were not the same. When the guy heard Jiang Hai's words, he couldn't help but shout loudly. Deliberately driving a fast car to hit someone, that's murder. Idiot. When your mother gave birth to you, did she throw you away and raise the placenta? Jiang Hai was amused when he heard the other party spouting nonsense. Do you think he's a good person? When it came to swearing, even if all the people in the United States combined their words, they still wouldn't be a match for a Chinese woman. What the F***ck are you talking about? Sure enough, when this guy heard Jiang Hai's words, he was angry. He came in front of Jiang Hai and wanted to pull Jiang Hai's collar with both hands. But Jiang Hai lifted him up with one hand. He didn't give him time to talk. Jiang Hai directly pushed him with his right hand and sent him flying. With a clang sound, this guy had already sat on the front hood of his Ferrari. The huge impact smashed the window with spiderweb-like cracks, and the front hood was also bent. Who the F***ck? This blow caused this guy to fall quite heavily. He sat in the car, clutching his waist as he howled in pain. Who the hell is this guy? So arrogant. No one dares to stop him? Looking at this guy's painful appearance, Jiang Hai turned his head indifferently and asked SH-20 Clive, when did Winthrop people become so arrogant? Chapter 325. This man is the nephew of Mayor Kirk. I heard that Mayor Kirk is recently applying for funding from the state to turn Winthrop into a small tourist spot. And this guy's father is the person in charge of tourism in the state government. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, SH-20 Clive came to Jiang Hai's side and whispered. Hearing this, Jiang Hai suddenly realized that this guy dared to be so arrogant here for this reason. According to Jiang Hai's understanding, if it wasn't related to their own interests, this guy dared to drive fast on the road in front of the school gate, endangering the lives of their children. Those fishermen, workers, and rough men would not let this guy go. They would have beaten him up long ago. Who cares who this guy's father is? Not to mention that this guy's father is just a leader in charge of tourism in the state. Even if his father is the governor, they would probably beat him up. In the United States, it has always been said that all people are equal. Their honor and status are not appointed by the people above, but by the people. If such a scandal is exposed, not to mention him, even his father will have to leave immediately. In the United States, the public opinion of dozens of people is already a very important thing. If hundreds of people are involved, even the state government can't suppress it. They need to use the power of the United States Congress. This is what it means to disperse power into the hands of the people. But the reason why he is so arrogant now is mainly because of his father. Winthrop is located on the edge of Boston's metropolitan area. In fact, this place is no longer Boston's territory. Since more than 100 years ago, when people settled here, this place has actually been a major fishing development area. However, There will be a day when all the fish will be caught. Now, the fish resources in Boston Bay are gradually drying up. Coupled with the impact of large-scale ocean fisheries, although the local fishing industry here is not like Newfoundland, one of the 4 major fisheries in Canada, where there is no fish to catch, the price of fish cannot be sold. But the cost of living is gradually increasing, and dollars are becoming less and less valuable. This is also an inevitable reason. Therefore, if Winthrop wanted to develop and let the residents of the town live a better life, it needed to develop a side business. Tourism was one of the best choices. This method could attract a large number of foreign tourists. Not only could it make the town famous, but it could also allow the town's residents to do some small businesses. Most of the children who came to Winthrop Elementary School came from poor families. It was precisely because of this that they hoped to do well in the tourism industry so that they could earn more money. That was why he allowed this guy to be so arrogant here. Otherwise, he would have been beaten away long ago. As for Shite Clive, he was invited by the mayor to be his brother's tour guide last week. It was also at that time that this guy had taken a liking to her. He had already been pestering her for a week. "You dare to hit me. You actually dare to hit me. I'm telling you, you're dead." Clutching his lower back, the man slowly climbed out of the car. Seeing his beloved car in such a state, he couldn't help but feel angry. "Did I hit you? What evidence do you have to say that I hit you? You can eat whatever you want, but you can't say whatever you want. Which I have mine, saw me hit you. Do you have any evidence? You clearly sat in the car yourself." With his arms crossed, Jiang Hai looked at this guy and said with a look of contempt, "This guy has angered everyone. How dare he yell here? Do you think these people are blind? They all saw it." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the man here roared loudly. Originally, he was hoping that 1 or 2 people would come out, but after waiting for a long time, there was no sound at all. When he looked over, he found that everyone was looking at him funny, but they didn't speak. You unruly people. There is a camera here. There is a video here." Looking at the silent crowd, the guy pointed to the camera at the school gate and shouted loudly, "Are you sure you want to see it? You should know that you came up first, and you even exceeded the speed limit. If I remember correctly, you also said that you deliberately exceeded the speed limit, and the purpose was to kill people." Hearing his words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but laugh and said indifferently, What nonsense are you talking about?" Looking at Jiang Hai's indifferent appearance, this guy couldn't help but take a step forward. But then he remembered Jiang Hai's fighting strength and abruptly stopped his step. Originally, he was about to spit out a curse, but at this time, he changed his expression. Although he was still trying to put up a strong front, anyone with a discerning eye could see that he was terrified. "I can prove it." He really said that he wanted to kill people. At this time, the old security guard, Uncle Kyle, who had been staying behind Jiang Hai, walked out and said with a face that deserved a beating. This old security guard was the old man who pulled Jiang Hai to brag. At this time, the old man naturally didn't like this guy named Kirk, so he stood up for Jiang Hai and said, You are ruthless." Knowing that he was not welcomed here, this Kirk had no other choice but to swallow his pride. After all, a wise man knows better than to fight when the odds are against him. Now he can't beat Jiang Hai. In the end, he cursed secretly. He didn't pick up the bouquet on the ground and went directly back to his sports car. Although his Ferrari was not the best, it was still very expensive. It was much more expensive than the average Mercedes-Benz and BMW. Naturally, its quality was also very good. After getting in, he started the engine. It could still be driven, so he left quickly. Looking at his back after he left, Jiang Hai couldn't help but curl his lips, but at the same time, he remembered what Shinny Clive had just said. The town was going to be developed, and he had now regarded this town as his home. If the town was going to be developed, then Jiang Hai could also contribute, but in the end, he still had to go to the mayor's house to ask, "Sandy, do you know the address of Mayor Wallace's house?" Looking at Shinny Clive, who showed a trace of worry on her face, Jiang Hai asked her. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, although Sandy didn't know what Jiang Hai wanted to do, she guessed that Jiang Hai might have beaten this guy and felt that the development of the town might be hindered, so he wanted to talk to the mayor. "I know, but it's okay. Mayor Wallace is famous for being a good mayor. He won't blame you for this. Looking at Jiang Hai, Clive smiled and said seriously, I know. I have something else to talk to him about. Let's go eat first. After eating, you can take me to the mayor's house. Jiang Hai smiled and said to Clive, then took her to his shield. Under everyone's envious eyes, Jiang Hai left with Clive. Some of these people were envious of Jiang Hai's car, and some were envious of Jiang Hai being so close to Clive. After all, this most beautiful flower was a goddess in these people's eyes. Of course, some women were envious of Clive, who could climb up a big tree like Jiang Hai. But at this time, the two didn't think much about it. After all, the relationship between the two was still a bit hazy. About 10 minutes later, Jiang Hai arrived outside a Western restaurant under the guidance of Clive. After parking the car, the two walked into the Western restaurant and had a romantic dinner, but still somewhat embarrassing. Jiang Hai really didn't care about other people's gazes. Generally speaking, eating Western food was rarely enough to fill one's stomach. After all, it took a long time for the dishes to be served, and the food was small. However, Jiang Hai was an exception. Because he couldn't fill his stomach, he would spend money until he was full. Of course, this way of eating would attract other people's attention. But for Jiang Hai, he didn't care about it. Whether he was full or not was actually the most important thing. Fortunately, Clive already knew about Jiang Hai's habits, so they didn't care about it. After the two were full, they went to the supermarket in town and bought a bottle of red wine as a gift. Then they went to Mayor Wallace's house. Mayor Wallace lived in the town. It was only about a 5-minute drive from the town hall. Of course, it was such a short distance. Usually, Mayor Wallace wouldn't drive to work. He basically walked. The old people in Winthrop were all familiar with his address because they had more or less been there before. When Jiang Hai's car stopped in front of Mayor Wallace's house, the old man happened to come out to throw out the trash. When he saw Jiang Hai's car, he was stunned. It wasn't easy to mistake this car. Not to mention a license plate. This was the only one in town. Jiang-o and Sandy, what can I do for you? Seeing Jiang Hai and Clive get out of the car, Mayor Wallace wiped his hands with his pajamas. After all, he had just thrown out the trash. Although it wasn't dirty, he didn't know what the other party was thinking. Therefore, it was more polite to wipe his hands before shaking hands. Oh, Uncle Kirk, don't you know what happened just now? Hearing Mayor Wallace's words, Clive asked with some surprise. It has been more than 2 hours since the incident at the school gate. Mayor Wallace didn't receive any news? After that guy was beaten, didn't he come to his uncle to yell? Hearing Clive's words, Mayor Wallace also said with a smile, Ah, it's about the conflict between Jiang and Hewlett. I know. Just now, that guy ran over and yelled at me, but I beat him up. Listening to his words, he really didn't seem angry, which made Jiang Hai and Sandy speechless. If this is the case, then you should go back quickly. Jiang did the right thing. I have nothing to be dissatisfied with. If I knew what that guy had done these days, not to mention Jiang Hai, I would beat him up. It's too shameful. With a wave of his hand, Mayor Wallace said indifferently. Although he wanted to develop Winthrop, he didn't want to sell his soul. This is one thing, and I want to talk to you about the tourist spots. Hearing Mayor Wallace's words, Jiang Hai chuckled. With his understanding of Mayor Wallace, although family is important, it is not to the extent that he would protect them in order to protect his family. Now, what Mayor Wallace said is what Jiang Hai wants to hear the most, and it is also someone who is worthy of his cooperation. Oh, then come in. Hearing Jiang Hai talking about the tourist spots, not only Mayor Wallace, but also Clive was stunned. She originally thought that Jiang Hai came to talk about his conflict with that guy, but she didn't expect there to be other things. Mayor Wallace was also a little surprised when he heard Jiang Hai's words. Although he knew that Jiang Hai was rich, he didn't know how much money Jiang Hai had. And judging from Jiang Hai's usual behavior, he didn't seem to be very interested in integrating into this town and this group. Now that Jiang Hai said that he wanted to talk to him about the tourist spots, he was also a little surprised. But anyway, Jiang Hai was also a rich man, a big taxpayer in the town. If he didn't say it, it didn't matter. But if he said it, he still had to listen. So Mayor Wallace signaled to Jiang Hai and 20 Clive. Then they walked into Mayor Wallace's house. When they opened the door, Jiang Hai saw an old woman sitting on the sofa, watching TV. When she saw Mayor Wallace come in with Jiang Hai, the woman also stood up and looked at Mayor Wallace curiously, as if she was asking something. "This is my wife, Maggie. This is Clive's eldest daughter, who you should have met before. She's the best teacher in our primary school. This is Jiang Hai, Sandy's boyfriend, and also the richest man in our town. He is the owner of the Green Forest. Oh no, the Soaring Dragon Manor. Well, Maggie, go to make 3 cups of coffee. We still have something to talk about." Seeing the old woman's gaze, Wallace smiled and introduced her to the 3 who were curious. The 3 nodded to indicate that they were greeting each other. Mayor Wallace's wife came over and took the bottle of medicinal wine as a gift, then walked into the kitchen. Then Mayor Wallace took Jiang Hai upstairs, where his study was. After the 3 people sat down, not long after, Mayor Wallace's wife came in, put 3 cups of coffee on the table, and left the study. At this time, Mayor Wallace also picked up the coffee cup in front of him and took a sip. "Come try it. My wife made coffee. The taste is still very good." Mayor Wallace smiled at Jiang Hai and the Scheich Clive in front of him and said to them with satisfaction. Hearing his words, although Jiang Hai didn't want to drink coffee, he also took a sip. The taste was indeed very strong. However, he didn't come here to drink coffee. After putting down the coffee cup, Jiang Hai looked at Mayor Wallace in front of him and said, "Mayor, this time I came to look for you mainly to talk about the tourism." Chapter 326. Can you tell me in detail about the plan for our town? In the study of Mayor Wallace, Jiang Hai looked at the respectable old man in front of him and said seriously. This was the first time that Shinny Clive had seen Jiang Hai so serious since she met him. For a moment, she really looked like a girlfriend sitting beside Jiang Hai without saying a word. The town's plan is very simple. As you know, our town doesn't develop industry, and we don't plan to sell land and let those foreign factories destroy our environment. But the environment is good, but the living standards of the residents really can improve. So I'm thinking about how to let the residents of the town get more income without destroying here. After taking another sip of coffee, Mayor Wallace spoke slowly. As the highest person in charge of the town, he thought that he had an obligation to think about the residents of the town. According to Mayor Wallace's words, Jiang Hai could easily understand his thoughts. In Mayor Wallace's view, the residents wanted to make money, so cutting back was definitely not possible. Americans also didn't know how to cut back. With their spending style, it was good enough that they didn't spend in advance. It was impossible to ask them to save money on clothing, food, housing, and transportation. If cutting back on income was not possible, then they could only increase their income. Originally, the main way of making money in the town was to sell some small things, open some small supermarkets, small restaurants, and so on. Most people mainly made money in 2 ways. One was the fishermen. After all, they lived by the sea. Some of these fishermen joined the ocean fishing companies in Boston, and some had their own boats. Usually, they would go around the high seas and catch some fish. The fishermen's income was originally very good, but in recent years, there were fewer and fewer fish. Although there was a fishing moratorium, the number of fish was inevitably decreasing. This and the fishermen's income were linked in a straight line. More and more people changed careers or went to Boston to make a living. If this continued, Winthrop might decline like Newfoundland before long. After all, without people, how could there be any development? Mayor Wallace's heart ached when he saw this scene. Therefore, he had been thinking of ways to make the town's residents live better all these years. They tried to raise their own fish fry, but the cost was too high and the profits were very thin. Coupled with the indiscriminate catching of others, their plan went bankrupt not long after. Later, they also tried to recruit some people to build a building. Of course, it couldn't be a factory, but to be honest, although Winthrop wasn't far from Boston, it wasn't far. But why did she come to Winthrop instead of staying in Boston? Massachusetts was not California. Not every piece of land was valuable, so the plan went bankrupt before it could be implemented. Over the years, Mayor Wallace had tried many ways. Finally, he set his sights on the tourism industry. Of course, rather than saying that he was targeting the tourism industry, it was more accurate to say that the Massachusetts government was targeting the tourism industry. In fact, the current situation in Winthrop did not represent the state of Massachusetts, but the state's finances were not very good. At least, they wanted to make some extra money. That was why they focused on the tourism industry, but not the domestic tourism development in the United States. For Americans, there was nothing fun in Boston. If they wanted to have fun, the most fun place would be California. Airfares in the United States were much cheaper than expected, especially airfares to the metropolises. They could even be bought for a few dozen dollars when it was cheap. For Americans, it would be great to go there. There was Hollywood, Las Vegas, and if they wanted to see the cutting-edge industries, there was Silicon Valley. If they wanted to have fun, there were beaches. Why should they come to Boston? Even if they did not go to Los Angeles, they could go to places with sunshine, beaches, bikinis, or Miami. It was spring all year round. It was close to Orlando, the world's largest Disneyland, and it was cheaper. If you wanted to look for a pasture, you could go to Montana. The sky there was bluer, and the grasslands were greener. You could also go to Texas. That was the home of cowboys. You couldn't have water, grass, or mountains. Every tourist destination had to have a highlight. The United States had almost no history to speak of. Under such circumstances, Massachusetts really did not have any bright spots. It was rare to hear people say that they ended up in Boston. At least, this was the case in the United States. If they wanted to go to a big city, they could go to New York. Boston's attraction was not good. Even if Winthrop wanted to develop the tourism industry, their target was not the tourists in the United States. Their target was actually foreign tourists. European and Asian tourists were their main targets, especially Asian tourists. For these tourists, they also have sunshine and beaches in their countries. But Boston, known as the best university in the United States, was still very attractive to them. It was precisely because of this that the Massachusetts government decided to develop this area. Through some domestic travel agencies, they would communicate with people from distant Asia who wanted to come here to play. They would conduct some activities to quickly apply for visas or limited discounted development to attract more tourists here. It was precisely because of this news that Mayor Wallace went to find his brother. His brother was a middle-level leader in the Tourism Bureau. He was in charge of tourism. How could there not be a lucrative position? Therefore, Mayor Wallace specially invited them to come over and let them see if Winthrop had any hope of being integrated into Boston's tourism development. He hoped that they could help. It was precisely because of this that the guy named Hewlett was interested in Scheikleif's plot. Hearing this, Jiang Hai also understood Mayor Wallace's intention. You mean you want to be integrated into Boston's development plan? After thinking about it, Jiang Hai knocked on the table and asked, "Yeah, but it doesn't seem possible now." Mayor Wallace nodded first, then shook his head. Is it because of me?" Looking at him nodding and shaking his head, Jiang Hai asked with some doubts. No. It has nothing to do with you. In fact, I should have figured it out a long time ago. As I said just now, there are bright spots. We really don't have any bright spots here. Boston itself is one of the oldest cities in the United States. It has some historical frontiers. In addition, there are many teams there which can attract sports. Cambridge and Newton have universities, which are also bright spots. Chelsea is a rich residential area. Quincy has a big market, and they're all good places to spend money. But here, hearing Jiang Hai's words, Mayor Wallace immediately shook his head and then explained. The biggest feature of Winthrop is that it has a sea, but Boston also has one. There is a harbor and a free ship museum there. Unlike here, there is nothing. It is just a small broken dock. What is there to see? No matter where it is, if you want to attract people to come and play, you must have something special. But where does Winthrop come from? Something special. If there is no special feature, we can build it. Looking at the somewhat decadent Mayor Wallace in front of him, Jiang Hai chuckled. Build it. Hearing Jiang Hai's understatement, Mayor Wallace couldn't help but wonder. How can it be built? In this world, any problem that can be solved with money is not a problem. Our dock is small and can be expanded. Our streets are small and can also be expanded. There are no traditional features, but it doesn't mean that we can't create our own. First of all, they live by the sea. They can build a row of small villas and hotels by the sea, charge a certain fee, and rent them to guests who come play. Our sea here is much cleaner than Boston's. It is a natural, good bathing place. Hearing Mayor Wallace's words, the corners of Jiang Hai's mouth unconsciously opened. These Americans sometimes like to drill holes in their mouths. Winthrop is nothing special in their eyes, but in Jiang Hai's eyes, there are bright spots everywhere. Hearing Jiang Hai mention the first man-made feature, Mayor Wallace's eyes lit up. Looking at his appearance, Jiang Hai didn't stop, but continued. At the same time, we can also build a pier and get more cruise ships and the like. When we get up in the morning, we can also call a fisherman to take the tourists out to sea to fish. We don't need to go too far, nor do we need a very developed fishing boat. As long as we can catch something, we can charge them a certain fee and they can eat it directly on the boat. If there's a lot of fish, these people can buy it back and we can sell it to them very cheaply. But I think that no matter how cheap it is, it will still be more than the wholesale price, so the fishermen in our town should be able to increase a lot of income. This idea is very common in China, quite common. In some coastal areas, almost during the tourist season, there will be people from everywhere who will go fishing. The things they catch will be eaten for free on the boat. Of course, there will be some handling fees when boarding the boat, and many of these people will also buy the fish that they catch. As long as the price is slightly lower than the retail price on the market, these people will be very willing to take it back. This is also the psychology of people. The fish that they catch themselves will be more delicious than the fish that they buy. Also, our freshwater fish resources are very developed. We can set up some fishing spots in the small rivers in the town for the tourists to fish there. Of course, it also depends on the time and the time. I don't know about other places, but if we catch the fish here casually, it is hard to imagine in my country. These fish are extremely precious because they are all wild and are so big. It will attract a large number of middle-aged and elderly tourists from our country to stay here. If they want to stay here, they will need to rent our villas and eat in restaurants. Of course, if they don't want to eat in restaurants, our supermarkets can just import some Chinese sauces and things like that to promote consumption. That you're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.